Chapter 771. Not long after Wu Qi left with the teleportation formation, Buddha Futsu, whose face was ashen and his fat body had shrunk by 3 times, returned to the sky above the Arctic pole with a gust of fragrant wind. The part below his waist that had been chopped off had already regenerated, but he had used up too much of his vitality. At this moment he looked shriveled, like a dried bamboo shoot. He no longer had the plump aura from before. That vile creature! That vile creature! Buddha Futsu trembled with rage as he pointed a finger at the teleportation formation that had quietly turned to dust. Clearly, Wu Qi had returned to Pangu continent with the teleportation formation, and he had immediately activated the formation's defensive mechanism, causing it to self-destruct. A gust of wind blew by, and in the next moment, a young novice monk, who looked to be only 13 or 14 years old and had red lips and white teeth, appeared beside Buddha Futsu. With a smile on his face, the young novice monk glanced at the icy layer of the Arctic pole, which had been turned into a mess by the battle, then shook his head and sighed softly. With a gentle wave of his hand, a sheet of light swept across the place, and the Arctic pole was restored to its original state. "Listen up, Futsu." The young novice monk chuckled. Buddha Futsu hurriedly stood still and looked at the young novice monk with blinking eyes. The young novice monk shook his head and said, "This is a lesson for you. If you still can't refine your true form into a human, you'll have to suffer more next time. Your current body is just the condensation of a wisp of my true spirit. Although you have the cultivation base of a Buddha, your body is too weak. If you don't refine your true form into a golden body and fuse it with your true spirit, you'll never be able to fight a real almighty expert." The young novice monk sniffed, narrowed his eyes, and shook his head with a sigh. "It will be shameful if an enemy as strong as a gold immortal can hurt a Buddha like you." Buddha Futsu answered with a frown. A beam of golden light rushed out of the top of his head, and the pagoda that stood thousands of feet tall appeared once again. He looked up at the pagoda in distress and scratched his head helplessly. His true form was this pagoda. Although he was in a human form now, it was only the condensation of a wisp of his true spirit. Only by working hard in his cultivation, cultivating his true form into a golden body, and fusing his true spirit with the golden body, could he finally be considered as a real Buddha. But how sturdy was his body? How much effort would it take to refine him into human form? It had been several eons since Buddha Futsu was enlightened by Amitabha, but even after he had spent so many eons refining his true form, the pagoda was still a pagoda, and there was no sign of it transforming into a human form. Glaring at Buddha Futsu, who was wearing a bitter face, the little monk gently pressed his palm on the top of his head. A beam of faint golden light with a strange aroma was injected into Buddha Futsu's body, causing his shriveled body to inflate like a balloon. In the blink of an eye, he had returned to his fair, chubby appearance. The essence chi that had been cut in half by Wu Qi had completely recovered, and was even stronger than before. Buddha Futsu put his palms together and bowed respectfully to Xiao Sha. "Thank you, revered one." This handsome and seemingly harmless little monk was none other than the current leader of the Buddhist League, the spiritual sustenance of millions of Buddhas, the most powerful almighty expert in the Buddhist League, Lord Buddha Amitabha. Narrowing his eyes, Amitabha said in a deep voice, "All right, let's call it a day. Since things have come to this, we must act according to our plan. Even if someone intervenes, what can they change?" With a cold snort, Amitabha turned into a breeze and faded away, leaving only a faint voice echoing in the air. "Focus on carving your foundation, Futsu. This is the foundation of your Tao. In this mortal world, if there are people who like to cause trouble, just let them do it. This is the general trend, and there's no need to pay attention to these trivial matters. Once this is done, the glory of the Buddhist League is right in front of us, and we'll settle everything with them one by one." Amitabha's voice faded away in the air, leaving behind only a sigh that seemed to be filled with hesitation and even a hint of panic. But no one heard the sigh, and even if they did, they would not believe what they heard. Was Amitabha hesitating? Was Amitabha panicking? How was that possible? What could make him hesitate? What could cause him to panic? Buddha Futsu cackled. He glanced around, then locked his hands into a Buddhist incantation gesture and cried out in a deep voice, "Forget!" A beam of golden light swept across the earth, erasing all the memories and records related to the battle just now. The memories of all the people in this mortal world were wiped clean by Buddha Futu, and all living beings continued to develop according to the will of the immortals and Buddhas. Not to mention what Amitabha and Buddha Futu had done on earth. After rushing into the teleportation formation, Wu Qi quickly transformed into a stream of light and sped toward Pangu continent. A beam of silver-green starlight flickered rapidly on his body. It was a beam of light left on him by the mirror of Kunlun, which had increased his speed by countless times. The long journey to Pangu continent, which should have taken him a very long time, had taken him less than a breath of time. The pressure around him lightened abruptly, and in the next moment, Wu Qi appeared in a valley covered with green grass on Pangu continent. Without bothering to look at the surrounding scenery, he hurriedly pressed his palm on the teleportation formation, activating the self-destruction restriction of the teleportation formation. The teleportation formation on the North Pole immediately self-destructed. This was what Prince Chongqing had specifically told him. If anyone found out he was using a teleportation formation, he must destroy it immediately. Wu Qi could understand the key to this. Du had a very strict control over Pangu continent. If ordinary immortals wanted to enter Pangu continent, they had to go through the immortal passes jointly set up by Du and the Celestial Court, and could only stay on Pangu continent briefly after going through a strict inspection. However, the teleportation formation constructed by Prince Chongqing and the others could bypass the supervision of the immortal passes. It would not be a good thing if any of them were to be controlled by the immortals. As soon as the formation was destroyed, Wu Qi suddenly felt a great heat flow erupting out of his body. Just now, he had severed Buddha Futu's fleshly body, which was not his actual fleshly body, but formed from a wisp of his true spirit fused with the immense willpower of his believers. In fact, Buddha Futu's fleshly body could be regarded as a nascent soul with the overall strength of a Buddha. Therefore, when Wu Qi devoured half of Buddha Futu's body, there was no flesh and blood essence in it, only an enormous stream of pure willpower, which contained a great deal of Buddha Futu's memories. The time Wu Qi spent in the teleportation formation was so short that the willpower he had devoured did not have the time to explode. When he was teleported to Pangu continent and destroyed the exposed teleportation formation on the other side, Wu Qi relaxed his mind, and the golden juice he had devoured immediately took effect. The willpower of the Buddhist League, which was enough to burst Wu Qi's body, surged violently inside him. The chaotic energy quickly devoured it, but it was the willpower transformed from half of Buddha Futu's body, which was equivalent to half of Buddha Futu's cultivation base. Wu Qi's cultivation base was only equivalent to that of a 5th-tier gold immortal, while Buddha Futu was a real primordial expert. Although Buddha Futu was only a 9th-tier primordial expert, half of his cultivation base was enough to burst hundreds of thousands of Wu Qi to pieces. Wu Qi was sweating profusely. He felt as if tens of thousands of suns were exploding inside him, and both his body and divine soul were about to be destroyed by the terrible force. For a moment, Wu Qi was very upset. He had lost his mind just now by devouring half of a Buddha's body. Wasn't he courting death? Countless information rushed into Wu Qi's divine soul. Buddha Futu's body was the condensation of his true spirit, and when Wu Qi devoured half of it, he had also devoured many of his memories. Among the information that rushed into Wu Qi's divine soul were all the techniques of the 33 Boundless Heavens Buddha's expiation scripture cultivated by Buddha Futu himself, and all the essences of the Great Light Indestructible Amitabha treasure scripture cultivated by Lord Buddha Amitabha. Wu Qi felt as if a huge pie had smashed onto his head. Buddha Futu's cultivation technique was of no use to Wu Qi unless he had a pagoda of his own. But Amitabha's Great Light Indestructible Amitabha treasure scripture was a supreme mystic art of the Buddhist League. Apart from Amitabha himself, only Buddha Futu, who had followed him for countless eons, knew all the techniques of this mystic art. Even Amitabha's many disciples, including many Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, only practiced the various divine abilities of the Buddhist League derived from the Great Light Indestructible Amitabha treasure scripture. Compared to the mystic art cultivated by Amitabha himself, it was like a drop of water in the ocean. Now that Wu Qi's body was in danger of exploding, he could not care less about anything else, and whether there would be any bad consequences after practicing Amitabha's cultivation technique. He took a deep breath and immediately sent the chaotic energy in his body into his interstitial world, leaving only his empty body behind. His enormous divine will guided a wisp of raging Buddhist willpower into his forehead, and Wu Qi sat cross-legged in the remote valley surrounded by green grass and began to practice Amitabha's special cultivation technique with all his might. A faint ringing of a bell came from Wu Qi's heart. In an instant, Wu Qi's skin turned pale golden, and a tiny wisp of white light began to flicker between his brows. The enormous divine will in his divine soul was quickly transformed into the willpower of the Buddhist League. Wu Qi began to recite the mantra of the Buddhist League, circulating his cultivation technique again and again according to the great light indestructible Amitabha treasure scripture. It truly deserved to be called Amitabha's special divine ability. When Wu Qi began to practice this cultivation technique, the enormous willpower, which was completely out of his control, immediately turned into an obedient little lamb. It flowed through Wu Qi's body according to his will, and at last all the willpower was sucked into his forehead. Deep and powerful ringing of a bell kept ringing out from Wu Qi's heart, sounding like the evening drum and morning bell, emanating a profound and thought-provoking aura. The golden hue on Wu Qi's skin grew brighter and brighter, then gradually turned obscure, and finally turned into an ancient and heavy dark golden color. As Wu Qi chanted the name of Buddha, 3 extra faces suddenly grew out of his head, facing east, south, west, and north. His body was shrouded in a faint golden light, and then 6 more arms poked out of his body. With 4 faces and 8 arms, his aura was solid and round like an indestructible Amitabha pearl. His energy essence was completely restrained inside his body. About 1/10,000th of the enormous willpower from Buddha Futu had been digested by Wu Qi, which had directly elevated Wu Qi's magic power, cultivation base, and fleshly body to the level of a second-tier gold immortal. Once Wu Qi had fully absorbed the enormous willpower hidden between his brows, he would be standing on the threshold of the realm of primordial. Coupled with the skeleton of the ancient immortal that was gradually digesting and absorbing in his body, Wu Qi's overall strength would certainly undergo a tremendous change if he was given a little time. On top of that, he had also formed the golden body of the Buddhist League, and the Dharma idol with 4 faces and 8 arms contained endless magical effects. Even Wu Qi needed time to study its various mysteries. Taking a deep breath and dismissing the Dharma idol, Wu Qi grinned and stamped his feet. An underground energy vein surged, and he had exercised the Kwafu chasing the sun step and left quickly. In just a few leaps, he was already 10 billion miles away. Chapter 772. Following the map in Changqing's Jade Slip, Wu Qi ran wildly across Penghu continent. Yuxiong Plain was the birthplace of the Yellow Emperor, Shenyuan. But now he was no longer in Yuxiong Plain, and Liangzhu had become the capital city of Diyu. The former sacred emperor of the human race had become the most powerful man on Penghu continent, and even played a decisive role in the entire universe. His residence had been moved to the land of the sacred emperor, located far to the north of Yuxiong Plain. Sensing the surging underground energy veins, Wu Qi transformed into a gust of wind, a ball of light, and a gust of wind that was no different from the blazing energy in the veins, driving the Kwafu chasing the sun step forward. With every step he took, he covered hundreds of millions or even billions of miles, and with every pulse of the energy veins, Wu Qi was sent far away. With every step he took, a huge amount of Penghu's sacred energy rushed into Wu Qi's body, quickly cleansing and tempering his fleshly body, making it stronger and stronger. Tempered by the Penghu's sacred energy, Wu Qi's fleshly body grew stronger and stronger, and the temperature in his body rose higher and higher. Wrapped in chaotic energy, the remains of the ancient immortals refined by Wu Qi's natal true flame were melting rapidly. Wu Qi's bones were becoming stronger and stronger, and with every step he took, his overall strength was undergoing a tremendous change. Even the willpower between his brows became active because of Wu Qi's rapid running. Controlled by the great light indestructible Amitabha treasure scripture, it kept turning into fragrant sweets that flowed through Wu Qi's body, strengthening his fleshly body, his divine sense, and everything else. The Kwafu chasing the sun step was one of the great divine abilities of the human race, and only a few elite human warriors could comprehend the pulse of Pangu continent and master it. Running around Pangu continent with the Kwafu chasing the sun step was the fastest way for these elite warriors to improve their cultivation base. Every step they took was equivalent to sitting in meditation and cultivating for months. Therefore, when they were free, the greatest hobby of the truly formidable warriors on Pangu continent was to roam around the continent. Feeling the pulsation of the earth veins and the strong wind blowing past his ears, he raised his head and saw that the stars in the sky had turned into extremely thin silver beams of light. Wu Qi ran to his heart's content. It took him half a month to reach the vicinity of Yuxiong Plain from the deep valley, and another month to the north. At last, he came to a vast mountain range. This mountain still had a primitive and wild aura. There were huge, ferocious beasts and fierce birds everywhere. The poisonous insects and snakes on the ground were especially huge. There were grass snakes that were thousands of feet long, centipedes that were hundreds of feet long, mosquitoes that were the size of water tanks, and many other strange creatures. This mountain range was also the most dangerous place in the north of Diyu. It was called the North Ridge, and it stretched for 1 trillion miles. Beyond the North Ridge was the territory of the legendary Northern Black Emperor. The Northern Black Emperor was an almighty figure who had existed since the creation of the world. The ancient gods under his command were all ominous deities who represented plagues and disasters. Most of the most ferocious and violent mountain spirits and water monsters under the heaven were gathered under his command. The reason why the Yellow Emperor Xianyuan had finally settled his residence in the North Ridge was to keep a close watch on the Northern Black Emperor and prevent his subordinates from harassing Diyu. A loud rumble echoed out from the ground, and a blast of air spread out in all directions. Amidst the explosion, Wu Qi appeared. Drenched in sweat, Wu Qi took a few deep breaths. After running for a month and a half, his body was emitting a terrible heat that could melt even gold and iron. His skin had turned red, and blood was flowing rapidly in his veins. The sound of blood rushing through his veins was comparable to the sound of waves in the Yangtze River. After looking at the mountain range that stretched for 1 trillion miles, Wu Qi took out the jade slip given to him by Prince Chongqing, which recorded the exact location of the land of Sacred Emperor, and crushed it. A beam of light shot out of the jade slip and transformed into a jade-colored portal in front of Wu Qi. He strode into the portal, and the scenery around him changed. In just a flash, he was teleported to the depths of the North Ridge. The entire area within 1 trillion miles of the North Ridge was sealed off by the Yellow Emperor Xuanyuan's restrictive magic. As long as one cast the corresponding magic near the North Ridge, he would be teleported to the vicinity of the land of Sacred Emperor. Otherwise, even if Wu Qi had the exact coordinates of the land of Sacred Emperor, it would take him more than half a year just to cross the North Ridge, which was still a barren landscape. Prince Chongqing had specifically instructed him to come to the land of Sacred Emperor first and ask for an audience with the Yellow Emperor, instead of delivering a letter to Yuxiong Plain. The information must be sent to the Yellow Emperor first, and only then could it be sent to the Human Emperor. Wu Qi had no idea what Prince Chongqing was thinking. Perhaps this was simply some kind of tradition? Twitching his lips, Wu Qi cast away the strange thoughts in his mind. In any case, there were too many messy traditions in Diyu, and there were all kinds of strange things that he could not do. Standing on a towering mountain peak, Wu Qi gazed into the distance. 1,000 miles ahead of him was the land of Sacred Emperor. It was a cone-shaped mountain that stood 1 million miles tall and nearly 100 million miles in circumference at its foot. Later, it was cut in half by a mighty deity who served the Yellow Emperor Xianyuan with a battle axe, and the cone-shaped mountain became a round platform. Hundreds of millions of humans lived on the flat mountaintop. After being transformed by the divine abilities of many almighty experts, the plain on the mountaintop had become fertile with water and grass. Wu Qi gazed into the distance at the land of Sacred Emperor, where the common people were herding livestock and farming in the boundless fertile land. It was a beautiful scene of idleness and leisure. This man-made plain was the land of Sacred Emperor. The part of the mountain that was chopped off by the great deity was raised into the air, hovering hundreds of miles above the land of Sacred Emperor. This mountain was protected by countless restrictive spells, and was densely covered with countless palaces and pavilions. This mountain, which was renamed Xianyuan Peak, was the current residence of the Yellow Emperor Xianyuan. According to Prince Chongqing, Xianyuan Peak had been refined into a very powerful magical artifact, capable of severely wounding a primordial immortal with a single strike. It was one of the trump cards that the Yellow Emperor Xianyuan used to deter the Northern Black Emperor. Over the course of countless eons, many of the Northern Black Emperor's subordinates who tried to sneak into Diyu and stir up trouble had suffered greatly at the foot of this Xianyuan Peak. As Wu Qi was gazing at the scenery in the land of Sacred Emperor, a long cloud suddenly emerged over it. 12 four-wheeled chariots forged from bronze, pulled by heavenly horses with wings on their backs, were approaching at top speed, accompanied by rumbling thunderclaps. Every single bronze chariot was extremely huge, and every piece of equipment on it was extremely heavy. They gave off a ferocious and barbaric aura. The heavily armored warriors standing on the bronze chariots all had ferocious faces and fierce gazes. They looked like a group of murderous butchers who had been imprisoned for countless years. The chariots came whistling up to Wu Qi. The heavily armored general on the leading chariot pulled out a bronze spear that was 20 feet long, pointed it at Wu Qi, and roared, "Tell me your name and purpose of coming here, boy. If you intend to trespass into the land of Sacred Emperor, you're dead. No matter who your parents, Lao Tzu, are, no one can protect you. I swear on the souls of your ancestors that if you intend to trespass into the land of Sacred Emperor, I'll chop off your head, pierce your heart, crush you, and feed you to the wolves." The general's cultivation base was about the same as Wu Qi's, a second-tier gold immortal. In Diyu's terms, he was a peak-level 8-star cultivator of the second Panga heaven, close to the level of 9 stars. If he were in Liangzhu, he would already be qualified to be a general, but in the land of Sacred Emperor, he was just the leader of a patrol team. Wu Qi's heart skipped a beat as he glanced at the hundreds of heavily armored warriors on the 12 chariots behind the general. Even the coachman was a peak-level 9-star cultivator of the first Panga heaven, which was equivalent to a peak-level heaven immortal, while the hundreds of heavily armored warriors were all second Panga heaven cultivators. Twitching his lips, Wu Qi turned to look at the land of Sacred Emperor. The vast expanse of the land of Sacred Emperor was shrouded in a dense purple mist, so dense that mortals could see it clearly with their naked eyes. The Pangu sacred energy here was even denser than that in Liangzhu, so one could imagine how good the cultivation conditions of the humans living here would be. In particular, the Yellow Emperor Xianyuan was a sacred emperor of virtue acknowledged by the heavenly Tao. With the immeasurable virtues, he had attained an immortal body and had an endless lifespan, just like those immortals. A sacred emperor of virtue like this could always unleash his sacred light of virtue to illuminate the surroundings. Under the protection of his sacred light, the lives of his soldiers were longer than those of ordinary people. Therefore, it was understandable that he had amassed a large number of experts and used such a powerful general as the leader of a patrol team. Glancing at the general, Wu Qi bowed and said, "I, Tan Lang, the Marquis of East Sea Province of Diyu, have come to see the Sacred Emperor on the order of Crown Prince Chongqing. I have an important military intelligence." The general paused for a moment, then cried out, "An important military intelligence from Crown Prince Chongqing? Show me your proof of identity." Hastily, Wu Qi flipped his hand and produced the seal of the Marquis of East Sea Province, as well as his waist medallion. Then, he flipped his palm, and a clump of purple flame burst into flames. It was the true flame of the human warriors, which could only be produced by compressing and purifying the Pangu sacred energy inside one's body to the extreme. Apart from the strongest human warriors, even those Buddhas and primordial immortals could not cultivate this true flame of the Pangu clan, which was called the true flame of Pangu province. Not bad at all, lad." The captain gave the ball of flame in Wu Qi's palm a fierce look. Then, with a pair of razor-sharp eyes, he gazed at Wu Qi's face, which looked like a 17 or 18 years old youth. He let out a strange laugh and said, "I think you're younger than 50? I can't believe your cultivation base has caught up with that of Lao Tzu. TSK, how many pills did you take to get to where you are today?" The general sighed with emotion, then grabbed Wu Qi's hand and pulled him onto the chariot. "Hold on tight, brothers," he cried out. "Let's go back at once. It's been a long time since Crown Prince Chongqing sent us any military intelligence. We can't afford to waste any more time." The chariot whistled through the air, filling the sky with thunderbolts as it sped toward the void where they had appeared out of thin air just now. In the blink of an eye, the chariot had plunged into a dense restrictive barrier. Suddenly, Wu Qi's eyes lit up. A huge mountain hovering in midair, as well as hundreds of nearby mountains, appeared in front of him. They had arrived at Xianyuan Peak, the residence of the Yellow Emperor. Chapter 773. While Wu Qi was running around Panga continent, the internal strife of the Yu clan in Zhong province was in full swing. On the day when Princess Zhongli came to visit, Yu Miao and Yu Miao had a sudden conflict, and the Yu clan was officially divided. As the current clan master of the Yu clan in Zhong province, Yu Miao undoubtedly had a great advantage. On the spot, he ordered the Yu clan's private army to besiege Yu Miao and his companions. Tens of thousands of soldiers attacked together, and the families of Yu Miao and the elders who were close to him were caught in a terrible situation. Most of their relatives lived in Yu clan's mansion, and at Yu Miao's order, more than 70% of them were captured alive. Yu Miao and the elders had escaped from Zhongning City without a hitch, but most of their relatives were under Yu Miao's control. Yu Miao was in charge of the righteous cause, as well as the Yu clan's private army and other forces. Even some of the Yu clan's allies could only communicate with Yu Miao, the clan leader. Therefore, Yu Miao and the dozen elders around him, who represented the Yu clan in Zhong province, were at a complete disadvantage. Over the past month or so, Yu Miao, who was in a good mood, had been chasing after Yu Miao and suppressing him. Those who had won in the struggle for power in the 30 provinces were all captured by Yu Miao's men. Those who were quick to react could still escape, but those who were slightly slower were captured alive on the throne of prefecture overseer by Yu Miao. All the powerful clans in Zhong province were watching the internal strife of the Yu clan. Such internal struggles for power and profit within clans were not uncommon in Great Yu, but few of them were so bloody and vivid. Yu Miao's ruthlessness and the speed of his fall were a classic example of the internal strife of the Yu clan. Originally, there were many wealthy clans in Zhong province who wanted to fish in troubled waters and gain some benefits. But when the Yu clan in Liangzhu suddenly sent dozens of elders and a large number of experts to visit Yu Miao, all these people who were eager to make a move obediently withdrew their hands. The Yu clan in Zhong province could be offended as much as they wanted, and the Yu clan in Liangzhu could not fight back. Anyone who dared to provoke Yu clan in Liangzhu could go ahead. But even Bo Zhongfu did not have the strength to compete with Yu clan in Liangzhu, which was an important power of De Yu's Directorate of Celestials. After more than a month of turmoil, Yu Miao's apparent power had been taken over by Yu Miao. The positions of prefecture overseer of 30 provinces, the power of all the branches of Yu clan, and the channels of interest of Yu clan in Zhong province were all taken over by Yu Miao's people. As a result, Yu Zong was accused of colluding with immortals with ulterior motives, and Bo Zhongfu issued an official order to capture him. Under the starry night, under the starlight, Princess Zhongli floated above a dark cloud with ominous fluctuations emitting from her body. Her enormous divine sense swept through the surroundings like flowing mercury. Her divine sense had completely enveloped the entire state in front of her, and she was searching inch by inch for anything suspicious. A dozen generals with the cultivation bases of the 5 and 6 stars realm of the second Panga heaven were quietly guarding Princess Zhongli in 3 serpent-flying ships with thousands of soldiers. These generals and soldiers were the trusted men sent by Gao, King Yufeng. When King Yufeng heard that Wu Qi was ambushed and dragged into the void, he flew into a rage. While complaining about it to Emperor Haozuan, he also sent his spies to gather information about the East Sea province. When Gao learned that Yu Miao was colluding with some powerful nobles of Zhong province to seize the East Sea province's interests, his temper flared up, and he immediately used all his connections in the imperial court to make the fiercest response to the matter. That was why the Yu clan in Liangzhu was able to infiltrate Zhong province so smoothly, and why Princess Zhang Li had thousands of elites around her. Yu Miao's quick fall had something to do with Gao's outburst. He had misjudged the position of Wu Qi in Gao's heart, and the impression Wu Qi had left in the hearts of some people in Diyu. When he did something he should not have done to the foundation of the missing Wu Qi, the reaction from all sides immediately sent the Yu clan in Zhong province, which he represented, into an irrecoverable state. Princess Zhang Li suddenly sneered. She recited a few incantations in a deep voice, and a chilly wind suddenly swept across the world. The bone-chilling cold wind covered the province below. This was a 6th-grade province under the jurisdiction of the central province. The one who ruled this province was the Yi clan, a local clan in the central province. After Bo Zhongfu took over Zhong province, the Yi clan had submitted to him as quickly as possible. After a round of flattery and swearing of loyalty, they had succeeded the former prefecture overseer who had fled, and gained the ruling power of the province. Among those nobles who had colluded with Yu Miao to share the interests of the East Sea province, Yi clan was the most active one. In the revenge launched by Princess Zhang Li more than a month ago, the province ruled by Yi clan was the most miserable one. All the crops, pasture, and vegetation in the province were eaten up by locusts in just 3 days. Then, a plague suddenly broke out, infecting more than 90% of the billions of people in the province and rendering them bedridden. In just over a month, the province was on the verge of collapse. But tonight, Princess Zhang Li sensed with her divine sense that Yu Miao and a dozen elders of Yu clan, who were wanted by Bo Zhongfu, as well as the members of Yu clan who had followed them out of the mansion, were all hiding in a secret chamber in Yi clan's mansion. The air of the whole province was densely filled with plague viruses invisible to the naked eye. These viruses were evolved from the divine power of the avatar of the god of Scourge that Princess Zhang Li had condensed. They were not ordinary viruses. They came and went without a trace, and they did not carry any energy reaction. They looked like living things, but also like inanimate objects at the same time. Unless it was cast by a god whose divine power was incompatible with divine power, ordinary magic and divine ability could not prevent them from being corroded. However, these tiny viruses were equivalent to Princess Zhang Li's clones. Her divine sense could control them at any time, and she could know everything that happened within 1,000 feet around them. The viruses had mixed with the air of the whole province, and there was no place in the province that could escape the detection of Princess Zhang Li's divine sense. Yu Miao and the others were in the secret chamber of the prefecture overseer's mansion. Princess Zhang Li had clearly sensed their aura. Yu Miao had even borrowed the power of the ghost god he worshipped and sealed off the surroundings of the secret chamber with several powerful magical artifacts. But, in the face of Princess Zhang Li's pure divine abilities and mystic arts of ancient gods, Yu Mu's defensive mechanisms were like sieves with holes everywhere and could not work at all. Under the control of Princess Zhang Li's divine sense, the concentration of the plague viruses in the air around Yu Miao and the others was getting higher and higher, gradually reaching a level of quantitative and qualitative change. In the secret chamber, which was spacious but extremely narrow and oppressive, Yu Miao sat cross-legged on a hassock, his face pale. A dozen elders of Yu clan also sat blankly on the hassock, all looking at the secluded elder who sat in the middle. The current head of Yi clan, Yi Tianyan, who was also the prefecture overseer of this 6th-grade province, was sitting awkwardly off to one side, sweat trickling down his body like running water. Yi Tianyan really did not want to entertain Yu Miao and his companions, who looked like stray dogs. But Yu Miao and his companions were just too strong for Yi clan to resist. Yu Miao had made it clear to him that if he did not take them in, all the members of Yi clan would be killed. Therefore, Yi Tianyan had no choice but to let them stay in the prefecture overseer's mansion. At the thought of those important members of Yi clan who had been cast with vicious restrictive spells and had their lives in Yu Miao's hands, Yi Tianyan had an urge to cry. Why did he listen to Yu Miao's bewitchment when he had nothing better to do? Why did he scheme for the territory of the East Sea? All the crops and vegetation in his territory had been wiped out by the plague of locusts. Not to mention this year, there would be no harvest for years to come. 90% of the people were bedridden and dying, and they could die in large numbers at any time. 90% of the people would die suddenly. Such a thing had never happened in the history of Diyu. It was not hard to imagine what would happen to Yi clan if such a thing happened in the history of Diyu. The wrath of the human emperor. At the thought of it, Yi Tianyan felt a chill run down his neck. Yu Miao and his clan were the bane of all existence. Yi Tianyan clenched his fists tightly, and he had an urge to fight Yu Miao. It was all Yu Miao's fault. If he had not bewitched him, how could Yi clan have been dragged into such a great trouble? But what kind of deity was guarding the East Sea province? The Marquis of East Sea province had been sucked into the void and disappeared. How could the East Sea province still make such a terrible counterattack? All the nobles of Zhong province who had colluded with Yu Miao to divide the interests of the East Sea province had suffered all kinds of natural disasters in their territories. Which god of disaster had Yu Miao offended? The secluded elder of Yu clan sat cross-legged on a hassock with his head bowed in silence. After a long while, he nodded slowly and said, "Now that things have come to this, there is only one way to save the Yu clan of Zhong province. The main clan in Liangzhu cannot completely wipe out this branch of the Yu clan of Zhong province. We just need to bow our heads, admit defeat, and give some compensation to the East Sea province. With that, the matter can still be solved." Yu Miao's face fell. "Great-grandfather, how can we bow our heads and admit defeat?" he asked through gritted teeth. The secluded elder and the other elders turned to look at Yu Miao at the same time. How could they bow their heads and admit defeat? The best way was to hand Yu Miao over to take the blame. These elders hated Yu Miao as well. Why did he have to torture Wu Qi? It was one thing for him to kill Wu Qi, but not only was he not killed, the Yu clan of Zhong province was on the brink of total decline. At the thought of their clan members who were captured alive by Yu Miao's order, these elders felt a sharp pain in their hearts. Although they had escaped, most of their clan members had fallen into the hands of the enemy. That was equivalent to wiping out their bloodline. Yu Miao could see the hostility in these elders' eyes, and a surge of anger rushed to his head. He rose to his feet angrily. Just as he was about to scold these elders who had lost their position, he suddenly felt that there was something wrong with the air around him. The air suddenly turned blue, as if it was filled with a thin layer of smoke. He took a deep breath, but not a single bit of oxygen entered his body. Instead, countless tiny things that gathered together and made the air sticky like glue rushed into his body. As soon as they entered his body, these horrible things, which were so tiny that they could not be detected by divine will, quickly grew and multiplied by relying on the nourishment of his blood essence. Before long, they had filled his blood vessels and internal organs. Yu Miao cried out in shock. Beside him, Yi Tianyan's body swayed and fell heavily to the ground. All that was left of Yi Tianyan was a thin layer of human skin. In just a breath's time, all of Yi Tianyan's flesh and blood had been devoured by the plague virus. Thick blue smoke spurted out from Yi Tianyan's cracked skin. This was the plague virus formed from all of Yi Tianyan's blood essence. The secluded elder was horrified. "The enemy is here. Go out and talk to them," he cried out hoarsely. The elder opened his mouth and let out a mouthful of blue blood. Wisps of blue smoke rose from the blood he spat out. The faces of the elders in the secret chamber fell instantly. Chapter 774. Under the starlight, Princess Zhonglu, who was clad in a black palace dress and had her long hair hanging loosely over her shoulders, looked so pale that her face was almost transparent. A thin layer of fluorescent light enveloped her petite body, making her look like a ghost who harvested souls at night. She stretched out her arms, her fingers moving nimbly in various incantation gestures. Amidst her deep chanting, all the plague viruses in the entire province began to gather in the prefecture overseer's mansion. As the night breeze blew, the blue torrents kept pouring into the mansion, converging on the secret chamber where Yu Miao and the others were hiding. The plague viruses, transformed from the divine power of the god of Scourge, were cunning and vicious. Wherever they passed, the houses corroded and collapsed, and the rocks weathered and turned into sand. If Princess Zhongli had not controlled the viruses to avoid the common people along the way, the provincial capital would have long been turned into a land of death. Shrill howls rang out from the mansion. Amidst their shrill cries, all the people of Yi clan turned into hollow human skins. Their flesh and blood nourished the plague viruses, which turned into plumes of blue smoke and soared into the sky, then turned around and rushed back to the mansion. The members of the Yu clan who were hiding in the mansion were moaning in pain as well. The viruses were corroding their bodies and devouring their flesh, blood, and energy essence. Their cultivation base was much stronger than the members of Yi clan, so their energy essence was very strong. With enough energy essence for the plague viruses to devour, they could live longer. However, as their blood vessels and internal organs were gradually infected by the viruses, the pain became longer and longer. Howling and screaming, they ran around the mansion in agony. The avatar Princess Zhongli had condensed could not only control the plague viruses, but also the so-called god of Scourge, who could cause any calamity. A member of the Yu clan, who was running wildly, suddenly stepped on empty air. A stone step under his feet broke, and he lost his balance and fell to the side. A muffled thud rang out as the poor man's temple hit the sharp corner of the stone step. His head exploded like an egg, and his brain sprayed a few feet away. Another member of the Yu clan was holding his belly and rolling on the ground, groaning in pain. Suddenly, the roof above his head collapsed, and a huge rock with the circumference of dozens of feet fell whistling down, flattening him like a pancake. One of Yu Miao's grandsons could not bear the severe pain in his body either. Roaring furiously, he performed an incantation gesture with both hands and recited an incantation, summoning the power of the ghost god he worshipped, turning it into a ball of raging fire and wrapping him up. He wanted to burn away the plague virus that was invading his body, and at the same time, destroy the virus that was growing in his body. However, the pain in his body suddenly increased by more than 10 times. It was a pain that exceeded the limit of what a normal person could endure. As soon as his fingers loosened, the spell that had just taken shape immediately exploded. Raging flames spewed out of his 7 orifices, and not long after, he was burned to ashes. One of Yu Miao's sons, who was as fat as a toad, struggled to pull out a bottle of detoxifying and life-saving pills with both hands. With great difficulty, he uncorked the bottle and fished out 2 pills the size of pigeon eggs, stuffing them into his mouth. But as the saliva in his mouth was sucked dry by the plague virus, the 2 pills did not turn into juice. Instead, they rolled down his throat. The 2 pills blocked his throat shoulder to shoulder, forcibly choking his windpipe. A perfectly fine person was stuck to death by 2 life-saving pills. His luck was really bad to the extreme. In just the time it took to finish a pot of tea, more than half of Yu Miao and the dozen or so elders of Yu clan had died because of all kinds of strange things. It was as if the god of plague had possessed them, and they died in all kinds of strange ways. Yu Miao and the others, who had witnessed it with their own eyes, could not believe that their clansmen could have such bad luck. This was the divine power of the god of Scourge. Every move and word of a person who was targeted by this divine power would bring disaster to himself, and any external factors would become the cause of the disaster. Unless there was a divine power that could restrain the divine power of the god of Scourge, the person who was targeted by this divine power would be subjected to all kinds of strange tortures, and it would not stop until the person was tortured to death. There were many divine powers that could restrain the god of Scourge, but the Tao of ghost and deity cultivated by Yu Miao and the others did not have the corresponding magic. Although their overall strength was much higher than that of Princess Zhongli, they could do nothing to stop the golden body of the god of Scourge that was wantonly killing their clansmen. A loud rumble rang out as a large gap suddenly cracked open in the ground. 2 of Yu Miao's descendants fell into the gap, their necks broken. Seeing that he had lost 2 more descendants, Yu Miao's eyes turned bloodshot. With a furious roar, he suddenly transformed into a gust of chilly wind and sped straight toward Princess Zhongli, who was hovering in midair. Princess Zhongli narrowed her eyes, which were as bright as the stars in the sky. She gently performed an incantation gesture with her little hands and pressed them toward Yu Miao. Calamity! Suddenly, an iron-billed bird appeared in front of Yu Miao, who was sprinting at full speed. It was a bird that could fly very fast, and its beak could break gold and iron, as well as penetrate all kinds of restrictive spells. In De Yu's army, there was a kind of magic-breaking bolt made from the long beak of an iron-billed bird. Yu Miao dared to swear on the souls of 18 generations of his ancestors that there was not a single iron-billed bird within 100 miles of him just now. But as Princess Zhang cried out softly, the iron-billed bird suddenly appeared in front of him, flying at full speed. The iron beak, measuring 1 foot and 2 inches long, accurately pierced into Yu Miao's mouth. A muffled noise rang out as the bird's long beak and neck came out from the back of Yu Miao's neck. Yu Miao's teeth were smashed by the iron beak, and blood mixed with broken teeth flowed down, staining the unlucky iron-billed bird. This was the horror of the god of Scourge's divine power. As long as one was targeted by it, all kinds of strange disasters would fall from the sky, and there was no way to guard against them in advance. Yu Miao, who was groaning in pain from his lungs, had no time to rush to Princess Zhanglu. In a flurry, he pulled the iron-billed bird out of the bird's mouth. The hard, coarse iron beak rubbed against his wound, causing his muscles to tremble and cold sweat to pour down his back. With a flip of his palm, a clump of black flame filled with an evil aura pressed heavily against the hole in his neck. Amidst the sizzling sound of skin and flesh being burned, Yu Miao had burned his wound into a bloody mess, temporarily protecting the fatal wound with this cruel mystic art. But before he could do so, a beam of 5-colored divine light rushed out of the top of Princess Zhongli's head. The golden body of the god of Scourge sat cross-legged in the magnificent shrine, its eyes emitting 2 extremely thin beams of evil light that locked onto Yu Miao's body. The golden body of the god of Scourge slowly raised its finger and snorted at Yu Miao. Suddenly, a meteorite appeared over Yu Miao's head and fell at a high speed. The meteorite measured about 1,000 feet in diameter and was entirely composed of extremely dense metal essence. Even a palm-sized piece of metal essence weighed tens of thousands of kilograms, so the weight of this meteorite was indeed frighteningly heavy. Yu Miao felt the fierce wind coming from the top of his head. He looked up blankly at the falling meteorite, and his pupils constricted to the size of a needle tip. "Bastard!" he roared at the top of his voice. For a moment, Yu Miao was filled with grief and speechless pain. Why was this huge meteorite coming straight at his head? He had just been severely wounded by the iron-billed ibis, and the pain had numbed his mind. How could he have the time to resist the bombardment of this meteorite? Just as Yu Miao was about to be smashed into a pulp by the meteorite, the secluded elder, shrouded in a thick blue mist, was already flying toward him furiously. Surrounded by a layer of misty flame, the secluded elder resisted the invasion of the blue plague virus. Then he slapped his palms into the air. 2 giant hands, each about 1,000 feet in circumference, emerged above Yu Miao's head with a deafening rumble. They grabbed the meteor, neutralized its tremendous impact, and casually tossed it aside. The secluded elder stared fixedly at Princess Zhanglu and said through gritted teeth, "The primordial Tao of divinity? Hee, you've actually awakened the bloodline of the ancient god? What you've condensed is the avatar of the god of Scourge, isn't it? No wonder my clan members have suffered such heavy casualties. You're so cruel, little girl." Princess Zhanglu twitched her lips, sneered proudly, and said, "Cut the crap, old fogey. If not for you plotting against my husband's territory and looking at your hideous appearance, how could I have the time to waste on you? I don't want to waste my time with you. Anyway, all the members of the Yu clan in Zhong province must die today." Then she performed an incantation gesture with both hands and recited a spell in a deep voice. Princess Zhanglu performed an incantation. All of a sudden, the secluded elder's body exploded one after another. Bloody holes the size of fists kept appearing on his body, and his flesh and blood were flying in all directions. The powerful incantation he had just prepared to unleash suddenly went out of control and backfired. A circle of ghosts shot out from his palms and attached themselves to his body, biting and gnawing at him. The secluded elder's shriveled body shrank rapidly, and all his blood essence was quickly sucked away by those ferocious ghosts. Yu Miao let out a shrill roar. How presumptuous! How dare a weak girl like you say you want to wipe out the Yu clan? Elders, let's kill this demoness together. We can't let her continue to wreak havoc. While Yu Miao's voice was still echoing in the air, a dozen elders, whose bodies were also exploding, had transformed into wild gusts of wind and rushed toward Princess Zhonglu. The plague viruses in their bodies turned into small bombs that kept exploding. Their bodies were not as strong as those of Deyu's warriors, and their fragile bodies could not withstand the power of the explosions. In just a few breaths of time, they were almost completely blown to pieces. As Yu Miao's cry rang out, these elders gritted their teeth and endured the severe pain while silently reciting spells to summon the ghosts and deities they worshipped. The only thought in their minds at the moment was to gather all their forces and kill Princess Zhonglu as quickly as possible. Princess Zhonglu gave a cold snort and gently waved her hand. At the same time, the dozen military officers sent by Gao gave a loud cry, and except for two who stayed at Princess Zhongli's side, all the other military officers rushed toward the elders, whose bodies were badly mutilated. Suddenly, a bright light flashed in the distant sky, and a dozen large flying ships were flying toward them at lightning speed. Yu Miao had come with a large army of Yu clan. Now that he had fallen out with Yu Miao, he had to kill him and not give him another chance to stir up trouble. This was the opportunity for Yu Miao to take complete control of the Yu clan in Zhong province. How could he let it go so easily? Surrounded by three parties, Yu Miao and his company were in a desperate situation. Chapter 775. The sky was filled with dark blue viruses, which had turned into thick blue clouds and covered the void, swallowing even the light of the stars and the moon. Yu Miao and the other elders of the Yu clan in Zhong province stood blankly in the void, staring blankly at the army that had surrounded them. Yu Miao, Yu Huai, and Yu Mu had arrived with his only son and grandson, but his wife was nowhere to be seen. In addition to the three of them, there were thousands of elite soldiers clad in black leather armors. They were the private army that the Yu clan in Liangzhu had urgently dispatched to support Yu Miao. There were also a dozen old oracles with white hair and beards hovering in the sky, looking down at the besieged Yu Miao and his companions. They were the elders sent by the Yu clan in Liangzhu. The three strongest elders had already stepped 1 foot into the realm of supreme oracles, and if it were not for the fact that their lifespans had run out and they could no longer find any pills that could prolong their lives, they would all have the confidence to become supreme oracles. With three experts like this joining hands, even if Yu Miao and his companions had a secluded elder among them, there was no way they could turn the situation around. Princess Zhonglu hovered in front of Yu Miao and his companions, her hands tucked under her sleeves as she stared coldly at them in silence. Yu Miao and his companions were already in a hopeless situation, so she did not want to waste her breath on these old men. Had it not been for Yu Miao's desire to seize Wu Qi's property, Princess Zhonglu would not have had the time to deal with him and his companions. She was so busy helping the people of the 6 states settle down their people that her feet could barely touch the ground, and she had no time to waste on Yu Miao and his companions. Princess Zhonglu twitched her lips and took a few steps back on her cloud as she watched Yu Miao arrive with the army of elites from the Yu clan in Liangzhu. She looked at Yu Miao with great interest, wanting to see what means he would use to kill Yu Miao and his companions. Yu Miao laughed bitterly. Trembling, he pulled out a pill bottle and crushed it, then took out 2 pills and tried to shove them into his mouth. However, he almost instinctively glanced at the golden body of the scourge floating above Princess Zhongli's head, and then stuffed the 2 pills back into his sleeves. Just now, he had seen with his own eyes that his unlucky child choked to death by a pill. He didn't want to die in such an ugly way. He breathed a sigh of relief, then looked at Yu Miao and said in a deep voice, "Do you really dare to use the power of Liangzhu to kill me?" This was already a violation of the laws of the Deyou clan. If everyone is like you, using the power of the main clan to bully the branch bloodlines, wouldn't the rules of the Deyou family be corrupted and chaotic? Yu Mu sighed softly. With his hands clasped behind his back, he looked at Yu Miao, shook his head, and said, "We've been fighting for so many years, but I've never been able to defeat you. But this time, you've made a mistake. You've targeted the foundation of the Marquis of East Sea Province, which has infuriated the master of Yen Tian Palace of the Secret Palace. He has sent a memorial to the Human Emperor, and the Human Emperor has ordered us to clean up the scum of Yu clan like you. Laughing grimly, Yu Miao continued in a deep voice, if the territories of every Marquis of the Yu province are divided before their life and death is determined, won't it make the hearts of countless Marquis of the Yu province bitterly disappointed? Great Elder, by doing this, you have actually destroyed the foundation of the Yu clan. Yu Miao's face twisted into a frown. Gnashing his teeth, he stared at Yu Miao and said in a deep voice, how could Tan Lang come back alive? A bright gleam flickered in Yu Miao's eyes. How can you be so sure that he is dead? He asked with a cold grin. Yu Miao's face flickered slightly, and his eyes flickered, not daring to meet Yu Miao's eyes. Grinning coldly, Yu Miao nodded slowly and said, I see. So, you are colluding with the traitors who plotted against the Marquis of East Sea Province? Yu Miao, the evidence is conclusive, and you can't hide it in front of so many people. Princess Zhongli nodded her head slowly and sneered under her breath. No wonder Yu Miao was jumping up and down and colluding with people to plot against the East Sea Province as soon as Wu Qi disappeared. It turned out that he had received some solid news and could confirm that Wu Qi was dead. Did that mean that Yu Miao knew who plotted against Wu Qi from behind? With a cold snort, Princess Zhongli raised her head proudly and said in a cold voice, Yu Miao, confess yourself. Who is the person who colluded with you? If you can confess everything, I can. After pondering for a brief moment, Princess Zhongli shook her head and said, you have to remove the roots when you are cutting the weeds. It's impossible for you to leave a few descendants, and all your people must be killed. However, Zixian can give you an intact corpse. This is the best treatment Zixian can give you. The corner of Yu Miao's mouth twitched. Princess Zhongli's words were too much for him to bear. He gave Princess Zhongli a quick glance, wondering why such a delicate little girl could be even crueler and bloodier than him in words. How could she be so skilled when it came to the business of wiping out an entire clan? After a long silence, Yu Miao suddenly burst into wild laughter. Shaking his head, he said, Well, I can't blame anyone for my loss. It's me who has underestimated that little Tan Lang. If I had known this, I would have killed him with a thunderous force. How could this disaster have happened? Glaring at Yu Miao said in a ferocious voice, was it Palace Master Yen Tian who personally reported to the Human Emperor that Liang Zhu should meddle in the affairs of Yu clan in Zhong province? Hee, that old fool Yu Chen sure knows how to borrow power. Congratulations. The Yu family of the Central Region can only obediently merge with the Liangzhu Yu family. Congratulations to our Yu family for becoming even stronger. While chuckling, Yu Miao pointed his finger at Yu Miao and said, Yu Miao, I'll kill you, your son, your grandson, your parents, and all the people who are directly related to you by blood. One day, I'll kill that old bastard Yu Chen with my own hands. If I'm unlucky and he doesn't live that long, then I'll definitely dig up his grave and grind his bones to ashes. Yu Miao laughed wildly, so much so that his saliva was spraying out of his mouth. He looked like a madman. Yu Miao looked at Yu Miao in confusion, wondering why he could still talk so arrogantly at this moment. Didn't he notice that the three elders with the highest cultivation base sent by Yu clan in Liangzhu could easily kill Yu Miao and his companions? Even if that secluded elder from Yu clan in Zhong province was here, he could never be a match for three elders who had stepped into the realm of supreme oracles. Princess Zhongli vaguely sensed that something was wrong. She performed an incantation gesture with both hands under her sleeves, and the shadow of a silver lotus quietly emerged between her brows. The five-colored divine ray behind her gradually condensed into a hazy lotus-like airwave, which swirled and swirled in the air. A cold, sharp aura kept spreading in all directions, cutting through the nearby void and leaving black marks on the surface of the void. The innate gold and silver lotus was quietly activated, and together with the five thunders immortal zither that had been fused with the spatial breaking pearl, Princess Zhongli was ready to respond. Meanwhile, the golden body of the god of Scourge hovering above her opened its eyes slightly. A dense gray divine power swirled around it, emanating an ominous aura that made one feel suffocated, as if some strange calamity would befall Yu Miao and his companions at any time. Yu Miao laughed even more crazily, waving his hands and shouting at the top of his voice, "Good, good. I admit defeat today. But there's still a long way to go. Let's wait and see." "Ha, Yu Miao, do you think you've won? Do you think you've won? I should have made up my mind long ago. But since Diyu has been heartless to me, of course I can be heartless to Diyu." Yu Miao's words made the faces of Yu clan's elders fall. Including the secluded elder from Yu clan in Zhong province, all the leading figures of Yu clan looked at Yu Miao in horror and snapped, "Yu Miao, what do you think you're doing?" Even the most insane subject of Diyu, even Feng Lingling, who was executed by the human emperor, did not dare to say that he would be heartless to Diyu just because Diyu had been heartless to him. By saying that, Yu Miao had not only turned against the Yu clan in Liangzhu, but also stood against the entire Diyu dynasty. With a cold snort, Yu Miao held his head up proudly and waved his right hand. An immortal talisman shrouded in purple mist appeared out of thin air in his palm. He coughed a mouthful of blood onto the talisman, and it suddenly burst into flames. "Patriarch! Patriarch!" Yu Miao cried out as he threw his head back. Plumes of purple smoke rose from the burning talisman, forming a huge arched door over Yu Miao's head. A huge gourd shrouded in scorching flames flew whistling out of the arched door. Standing hundreds of feet tall, the gourd slowly turned its head and sprayed out a stream of crimson flame from its mouth. Amidst the flame, hundreds of thousands of flying swords, each the size of a little finger, shot out, leaving countless tiny sword beams in the air like a rainstorm. Accompanied by a deafening roar of wind and fire, the overwhelming flame and the rain of swords fell down. Except for Yu Miao and a dozen elders of the Yu clan in Zhong province, everyone else was engulfed by the flame and the rain of swords. Yu Miao and the others cried out at the top of their lungs. Caught off guard, they were caught in the flame, and the crimson flame burned them badly. The armors of the heavily armored soldiers were burned red, and some were even melted into molten iron on the spot. The rain of swords had a terrible penetrating force, so much so that even the three strongest elders of the Yu clan in Liangzhu had dozens of tiny holes pierced through their bodies. Apart from Princess Zhanglu, everyone present was wounded. Even though Princess Zhanglu had secretly unleashed the innate gold and silver lotus to protect herself, the rain of swords still made the five-colored divine light around her tremble violently. The piercing force of each tiny flying sword was like the weight of Mount Tai, forcing Princess Zhanglu to stagger and fly backward, unable to come up with an effective response. A deep, cold laugh rang out. Immediately after the huge gourd, an immortal dressed in a Taoist robe strode out of the arched door. Judging by his appearance, he was none other than Immortal Gourd, the mastermind behind the Gourd Immortal Market. Immortal Gourd stretched out his hand and transformed it into a huge golden palm, grabbing Yu Miao and the other elders of the Yu clan in Zhong province. He gave Yu Miao a cold glance and said in a deep voice, "Yu Miao, it seems you have some ability. The foundation of the Yu clan in Zhong province has been completely taken away by you. Yu Miao will settle the score with you in the future. I won't fight a junior like you, lest people laugh at me for bullying the weak." Yu Miao and the other members of the Yu clan in Liangzhu stared at Immortal Gourd as if they were looking at a ghost. Yu Miao pointed at Immortal Gourd and cried out in shock, You are. Immortal Gourd gave Yu Miao a ferocious smile, then suddenly burst out laughing and said, "I'm true Immortal Gourd. Ha, don't tell me you know me?" Laughing wildly, Immortal Gourd climbed onto the huge gourd, ripped open the void, and was about to leave. Chapter 776. King Zhangqiu interrupted Lu Bang and said coldly, "This girl has formed her golden body of the ancient god, and she belongs to me." Princess Zhanglu pointed her finger at true Immortal Gourd and cried out softly, "Go!" In the imperial court of Diyu, colluding with an immortal was a felony punishable by the extermination of one's entire clan. As the former head of the Yu clan in Zhong province, Yu Zong had cultivated the body of an immortal, and this was a major event that could bring disaster to the entire Yu clan in Liangzhu. If the powerful clans in Liangzhu learned that a member of the Yu family had become an immortal, they would definitely join forces to condemn the Yu family. By then, the Yu family would be humiliated as well. Countless raindrops fell from the sky, and the axe condensed by the gray smoke was shattered into pieces by the raindrops summoned by Yinglong. Princess Zhang Lu let out a clear cry, and the flying sword condensed of gold element energy in her palm shot toward Yuzong's chest in a silver beam of light. At the same time, the divine ray of five-colored light behind her tumbled, and the energies of earth, water, fire, and wind tumbled and turned into a colorful mountain that smashed down toward Yuzong's head. Wherever the mountain passed, all the natural energy was absorbed by it. Yuzong, who bore the brunt of the attack, felt his body sink as all the natural energy around him was sucked dry by the mountain, and his overall strength was instantly suppressed by 30%. Princess Zhang Lu snorted lightly. The gray divine energy that was swirling around the golden body of the god of Scourge suddenly transformed into a huge axe that was tens of feet long. The divine ray of five-colored light rushed up and injected into the gray axe, filling it with all the colors and making it look like it was carved out of crystal. She extracted the innate gold element energy from the lotus and injected it into the axe, and soon, the surface of the axe was coated with a dazzling silver gleam. Princess Zhang Li's face turned blue with anger. She snorted coldly and continued to extract the gold element energy from the lotus. A silver gleam flickered in her palm as she compressed the rich gold element energy into a flying sword that gleamed with a cold gleam. She was about to unleash the flying sword and attack UK with the invincible sharpness of the gold element energy. But Yu Miao's gourd was obviously a rare spirit item, and its flame was the nemesis of gold element energy. Therefore, Princess Zhang Li's flying sword might not be able to hurt him. Lu Bang laughed. A sinister light flashed in his eyes as he summoned the primordial chaos sky-covering flag and threw it at Princess Zhang Lu. On a lofty mountain thousands of miles away, Lu Bang and King Zhangqiu were sitting opposite each other, drinking merrily. Their gazes were focused on Princess Zhang Lu across the distance of thousands of miles. Suddenly, Lu Bang threw down the wine vessel and sighed with pleasure. How can I let such a beautiful girl wander the world and suffer the hardships of being battered by the wind and rain? I have a tender heart for the fairer sex. Why don't? He slapped the gourd beneath him, and a jet of flame sprayed out of its mouth. The sticky, gelatinous flame transformed into a huge umbrella behind true immortal gourd, shielding him from all directions. The large umbrella made of raging flames spun rapidly, and the dimensional blade heavily chopped down on the large umbrella, producing a crisp sound. Although the large flame umbrella was cut in half and dissipated into the air, the dimensional blade was also neutralized by the surging flames. After a slight flash, it exploded with a strong light and disappeared without a trace. Laughing strangely, UK said with mixed emotions, "If the oracles of Du cast aside those lousy rules, any supreme oracle would be able to reach the peak of gold immortal realm in just 1,000 years. The lifespan of a supreme oracle will run out one day, but when one becomes a heaven immortal, he or she will have an infinite lifespan. Compared to that, I'd rather become an immortal." The elders of the Yu clan in Liangzhu also understood the stakes. Ignoring the injuries they had suffered from Yu Miao's surprise attack, they took out various bone talismans and activated them, using their most powerful mystic arts to attack Yu Miao. But now, both of them had taken a fancy to Princess Zhang Lu at the same time, and they refused to let go of each other. Lu Bang could not help but sigh and say, "Well, why don't we just kill them, lest we hurt our friendship?" Accompanied by a jarring whistling sound, the axe transformed into a silver beam of light and went straight toward True Immortal Gourd's head. True Immortal Gourd's face flickered. He threw UK and the others aside and pressed both hands on the gourd beneath him. A deafening rumble echoed out as a great plume of flame sprayed out of the gourd's mouth. The thick and viscous flame twisted and twitched in the air, quickly condensing into a huge sawtooth scythe that flew toward Princess Zhang Li's axe. Regardless of what the exclamations of UK and the others meant, Princess Zhang Lu just waved her hand. A jarring noise of shattering rang out in the void, and a pitch-black blade of light, about 100 feet long, slashed toward true immortal Gord with a shrill whistle. Wherever the blade of light passed, countless tiny rifts were torn open in the void, from which came gusts of energy that could be seen with naked eyes, blowing the surrounding mountains to pieces. The winged dragon was also an ancient deity. Even though the winged dragon that true immortal Gord had summoned out was only a soul, it possessed astonishing power. Each of its raindrops weighed tens of thousands of kilograms. When they struck the great axe, the axe released a deep howl and large swathes of gray energy were peeled off from the surface of the axe. Furthermore, Dragon was an ancient god, and belonged to the category of auspicious gods who blessed the weather. Although its divine power could not completely restrain the power of the god of Scourge, it had a pretty good weakening effect. His face unsightly, Uk gritted his teeth and bellowed. Throughout the generations of the Yu clan in Zhong province, only the former clan leader, Yu Mu, has a beast soul of Dragon. True immortal Gord you are really... Upon hearing Yu Mu's words, Yu Mu, whose face had also turned extremely unsightly, waved his hand and cried out, "Somebody! Capture this traitor who has betrayed to you and joined the immortal Tao, dead or alive. Yu Mu has colluded with immortals and is plotting against us. Kill them all." Both men exchanged a glance, their gazes flickering with flames, but neither of them was willing to give in. An existence like Princess Zhonglu, who had awakened the bloodline of an innate god and formed the golden body of an ancient god, would bring great benefits to both immortals and the experts from Diyu. For King Zhangqiu, if he could marry Princess Zhonglu, he would be able to keep her bloodline in his clan, and in the future, there would be more descendants who could awaken the bloodline of a god. It was of great significance to the strength of King Zhangqiu's bloodline. True immortal Gord cried out in surprise. He turned to look at the dimensional dagger unleashed by Princess Zhonglu, then suddenly nodded and said with a smile, "Little girl, your cultivation base is not that great, but I can't believe you have the ability to tear the void. That's amazing. But it's a pity that your cultivation base is too weak." True immortal Gord gave a cold snort. Countless tiny, faint golden flying swords shot out from the gourd amidst the raging flames. The countless tiny flying swords kept striking the multicolored axe, causing countless tiny sparks to fly out from the axe. The flying swords and the axe exploded in midair after colliding with each other, but with each collision, the axe dimmed a little. In just 3 seconds, at least 1,000,000 tiny flying swords had slammed into the axe, shattering the 5-colored divine light in it. In the end, only the gray axe, condensed from the divine power of the god of Scourge, was left to hack at true immortal Gord. In the face of the bizarre and unpredictable divine power of the god of Scourge, true immortal Gord dared not to be careless. Scorching flames rolled out of his body and merged with the flames rising from the gourd. A beam of red light shot up from the top of his head, reaching a height of a few miles. Gradually, a circular halo as bright as a mirror emerged in the red light. The silhouette of a winged dragon emerged from the halo. The miles-long dragon raised its head and roared into the sky, then opened its mouth and breathed out. Immediately, countless raindrops emerged from the air, striking on the gray axe like arrows. Yu Mu laughed aloud, then pointed at Princess Zhonglu, whose face was slightly pale, and said, "Your divine abilities and mystic arts are pretty good, but it's a pity that your cultivation base is a little too low. I'll spare your life today, and in the future, I'll seek revenge on you. When that time comes." Yu Mu patted Yu Mu's shoulder and said coolly, "Remember this girl's face. She has awakened the bloodline of an ancient god, and she is a rare match for you. All your children and grandchildren are dead. If you can give birth to a child with her, his aptitude will definitely be excellent." True immortal Gord gave Yu Mu a cold look and said with a cold grin, "That's right, I'm Yu Mu, the 7th-generation great ancestor of Yu Mu, the former clan leader of Yu clan in Zhong province, and the current true immortal Gord. In those years, I had already stepped 1 foot into the realm of supreme oracles, but my life was coming to an end. Therefore, I joined the Tao League and practiced the art of energy refinement. In 10 years, I attained the nascent divinity realm. In 30 years I became a heaven immortal, and in just 1,000 years, I became a gold immortal." Yu Mu smiled respectfully at Yu Mu and said, "Everything will be as you said, patriarch. This girl has formed the golden body of an ancient god, and she is indeed a perfect match for you." Seeing that true immortal Gord was about to flee with Yu Mu and the others, Princess Zhonglu arched her brows. Her anger soared to the top of her head, and a blood line twitched on her forehead. It was fine if true immortal Gord wanted to save the other elders of Yu clan, but she could not let Yu Mu leave safely, as he had been pestering Wu Qi. "What a good trick. You are a good girl. Why don't you become my partner in dual cultivation?" Just a moment ago, he had said that Princess Zhonglu was a perfect match for Yu Mu. Now that he saw Princess Zhonglu was so amazing, he was immediately tempted. He gave a strange cry, and the soul of Ing Dragon hovering above him let out a deafening roar as it swung its claws toward Princess Zhonglu. Yu Mu and Yu Mu exchanged a glance. Yu Mu shook his head lightly and said, "He only learned of my existence in the last 100 years. Why am I explaining all this to you? Anyway, if I save Yu Mu and the others today, someone will come to settle the score with you in Liangzhu in the future." The blade and the axe clashed against each other. The incomparably sharp innate gold element power split the blade into two, but the raging flame swept up, and a large layer of the silver light on the axe was also burned away by the high-temperature flame. The silver light suddenly dimmed down, revealing the multicolored surface of the axe underneath. Amidst a muffled rumble, a few mountains between Princess Zhonglu and true immortal Gord were smashed into dust by the energy storm, while the dimensional blade unleashed by Princess Zhonglu with the help of the Five Thunders immortal zither had reached a place less than 10 feet behind true immortal Gord. Pointing at Yu Mu growled, "Yu Mu has been colluding with you all this time? Only by killing Yu Mu and his companions on the spot, then taking the initiative to apologize to the human emperor, as well as a few itinerant sects, and pushing all the blame to them could he avoid Yu clan's passive position. No matter how strong Yu Miao's current cultivation base was, he was determined to kill Yu Miao on the spot, no matter what the price was." King Zhangqiu pondered for a moment, then finally nodded. Chapter 777. The ancient tree was the dragon blood rejuvenation wood, which was rare even in the ancient times. It was the only strange tree in the world that had no upper limit on its size. Born in the void, it would grow 1 centimeter larger every 10,000 years, and the longer it grew, the larger it would grow. As long as no one cut it down, it could continue to grow without an upper limit. This giant tree was 30,000 miles tall, and the thickest part of its trunk was 3,000 miles. The widest part of its crown and roots was over 100,000 miles in circumference. Judging from its size, this was probably a magical tree that had been growing since the beginning of the world. While Wu Qi was curiously studying the giant tree, a young man and woman clad in white Taoist robes were seen flying up from the top of a mountain not far away. Riding on the back of the dragon, a young man and a young woman clad in white Taoist robes were laughing merrily, driving the wind and pushing the clouds away as they flew into the distance. "Oh, Zixian is fighting someone? Let's wait for a few more days. When I'm done with what I have to do, I'll go back to Zhong province and settle the score with Yu Miao. Before I go back, you better not break the bones of that old fellow Yu Miao. With his old age, how can he withstand a few brutal blows from you? But why did you have a conflict with Yu Miao? Could it be that he has done something again?" Nevertheless, in the mouths of these two bull-headed men, those ores were like popcorn-like snacks. They chewed these ores with big mouthfuls, causing a loud creaking noise. After chewing the ores into pieces, they swallowed them into their stomachs, then grabbed other ores and threw them into their mouths. While Wu Qi was still worrying about Yu Miao, fearing that he would not be able to take revenge on him when he returned to Zhong province, he did not know that Yu Miao's entire clan had been killed by Princess Zhonglu. Now, the Yu clan in Zhong province represented by Yu Miao was at the end of its tether. If it had not been for Yu Miao's sudden appearance, the Yu clan in Zhong province would have been completely wiped out. When would he be able to avoid all kinds of fights in the outside world, and let the people around him have such a paradise? But when he thought of the identity of the Yellow Emperor Xinyuan, Wu Qi sighed again. Perhaps only an almighty expert with such an identity could enjoy such a free and unfettered life. However, even with Emperor Huang Xuanyuan's identity and strength, didn't he have things to worry about? The juice of the dragon blood rejuvenation tree was bright red, and its smell was like the blood essence of a true dragon. That was why there were two words in its name, dragon blood. The so-called spring rejuvenation was that it was constantly absorbing and spitting out the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. The roots of the tree were spraying the spring rejuvenation spring all the time, which was a kind of spirit liquid that could keep a person's appearance and energy in a youthful state forever, and could even revive withered flowers and trees. If the Yellow Emperor Xianyuan really had nothing to worry about, why did he send Prince Chongqing to the ghost realm? Their fleshly bodies were extremely strong. Wu Qi had an intuition that in terms of fleshly body alone, even if he combined his true body of heaven and earth, the dragon transformation script, and the dragon kill technique of a second-tier gold immortal, he was still not as strong as these two big fellows. The bronze chariot sped forward. Along the way, Wu Qi saw many ancient immortals, who were laughing and wandering among the mountains around Xianyuan Peak. They were either riding dragons, phoenixes, or other divine beasts and immortal birds as their mounts. They were drinking and having merry gatherings with their friends. They were definitely not as nervous as the immortals in the outside world. They were not like the immortals in the outside world who would draw their swords against each other for a piece of spirit stone. Carefully, Wu Qi approached the two muscular bull-headed men, who stood over 60 feet tall. Both of them looked very unusual. Their exposed skin had a metallic luster, and they did not look like they were made of flesh and blood. Their footsteps were sonorous and powerful, and when Wu Qi looked at their feet, he could tell that they were two huge ox hooves. Their feet looked as if they were made of metal, and when they bumped into the rocks, sparks flew out in all directions, making Wu Qi's scalp go numb. The general who led the patrol team gave them a glance and said with a smile, "Oh, they are Nong Yunxing and Green Leaf Immortal, good friends of the sacred emperor." Glancing at Wu Qi, who deliberately put on a stunned expression, the general laughed and patted Wu Qi on the shoulder. "Don't make such a fuss, lad. They are good friends who fought side by side with the sacred emperor. The ancient immortals are different from the immortals of today, very different. Nong Yunxing and Green Leaf Immortal have the right to enter and leave Liangzhu. Do you understand now?" Wrapped in a long cloud, the bronze chariot sped through the void, leaving a cloud tail that was miles long behind as it sped toward Xianyuan Peak. But what about the immortals of today? They paid more attention to polishing their fleshly bodies, nascent divinity, and strengthening themselves. They crazily plundered all natural energies and natural treasures to nourish themselves, and would do anything in pursuit of strength. They had embarked on a completely different path from the free and unfettered ancient immortals. After sighing with emotion for a while, Wu Qi shook his head. The immortals who occupied the outer heavenly realms now were once a branch of the ancient immortals. But these ancient immortals who lived on Xianyuan Peak had kept their hearts of innocence, and they still regarded themselves as human beings. Therefore, they could freely enter and leave Xianyuan Peak and Liangzhu. But these immortals of today were greedy, brutal, despicable, and selfish. Therefore, they had embarked on a path that was completely different from the ancient immortals, and had become the enemies of the entire human race. The ancient immortals ate rain and dew, and their hearts were clear and without any impurities. They could mobilize the great power of heaven and earth with their very weak strength. They had mastered power, but they did not blindly pursue it. Instead, they used their great strength to drive away wild beasts, demons, and protected the weak human race, making countless contributions and virtues in the process of the rise of the human race. Their cultivation method pointed directly to the great Tao of communicating with heaven and earth. Although it did not improve their cultivation base, in terms of mobilizing and borrowing the laws of heaven and earth, even the current primordial immortals were no match for them. As mentioned earlier, Xianyuan Peak was refined from the upper half of the land of Sacred Emperor, and looked like a conical peak from a distance. It was a majestic mountain. Although it was only half of the mountain, it was still hundreds of thousands of miles high, and tens of millions of miles wide at the foot of the mountain. There were countless exotic flowers and plants on the mountain, and palaces and pavilions of various sizes dotted the mountains and forests. Compared to the old-fashioned and almost rigid architectural style of Diyu, the buildings here had countless more variations. While leading Wu Qi to the top of Xianyuan Peak, the two fellows would grab some supreme-grade ores that gleamed with a metallic luster from time to time and stuff them into their mouths. Wu Qi recognized these ores. Xianyuan Peak was full of treasures, and these ores were supreme-grade minerals that were rarely seen in the outside world. They were all excellent materials for crafting supreme-grade gold immortal artifacts, which showed how sturdy they were. When Princess Zhang killed someone, Wu Qi seemed to sense something in his heart. He jerked his head back and glanced in the direction of Zhong Province. Dozens of mountains of various sizes hovered in the sky around Xianyuan Peak, slowly rotating around it. These mountains were of different colors, materials, and sizes. The largest was half the size of Xianyuan Peak, while the smallest was only a dozen miles high and hundreds of miles in circumference. Among them, there were mountains made of pure gold, pure silver, pure jade, and pure crystal. There was also a mountain that was made of an incomparably huge ancient green tree. Sparkling and translucent water splashed out from the roots of the tree. They were a pair of immortals, and their aura was simple and obscure. Clearly, they were ancient immortals who practiced ancient techniques. Ancient immortals were different from the cultivators and immortals of today. They focused more on comprehending the Tao of nature and borrowing the power of nature instead of accumulating their own strength. The cultivation base of this pair of ancient immortals was probably equivalent to that of today's 30th tier heaven immortals, but when they fought, it was likely that they would exert a power no weaker than that of ordinary primordial immortals. These gods came in all kinds of strange shapes, some with the body of a beast and the head of a human, some with the head of a beast and the body of a human, some with the body of a beast and the tail of a snake. Most of them were smiling as they mingled with the ancient immortals, drinking and drinking together, competing with each other in magic, or traveling together. Their carefree and happy appearance made Wu Qi very envious. Wu Qi exclaimed as he pointed at the man and the woman and cried out, "They are." Being able to enter and leave Liangzhu was equivalent to being an important minister of Diyu. Nong Yunsheng and Green Leaf Fairy were unknown in the myths and legends that Wu Qi knew, but they were actually comrades who fought side by side with the Yellow Emperor Xianyuan. Wu Qi looked at the two of them with great fascination. How great would it be if he could obtain their cultivation techniques? In addition to these carefree ancient immortals, there were more ancient gods coming and going around Xianyuan Peak, and more than 30% of them were the bloodline of the Yellow Emperor Xianyuan. The Yellow Emperor Xianyuan had become a sacred emperor with immeasurable virtues, and he was in love with women from various clans. All of the children he gave birth to were extraordinary, and each of them had obtained a portion of the power of the heavenly Tao. All of them were gods. Prince Changqin, for example, was a direct descendant of the Yellow Emperor Xianyuan. He was born with great divine abilities, but he was different from ordinary humans. Wu Qi broke out in a cold sweat. How could Xianyuan Peak be guarded by Qiyu? Amidst the rumbling of thunder, the bronze chariot sent Wu Qi straight to Xianyuan Peak. Outside one of the mountain gates of Xianyuan Peak, a few minotaurs clad in exquisite armors asked Wu Qi a few questions, and then 2 minotaurs led Wu Qi up Xianyuan Peak. Meanwhile, the patrol team that brought Wu Qi here turned around and continued their patrol. They could not easily climb up Xianyuan Peak if they had nothing to do. The dragon blood rejuvenation tree was so huge that it could secrete a considerable amount of spring water every day. Judging from the lustrous spring water that enveloped Xianyuan Peak and the dozens of mountains around it, it could be seen that the people living on the mountain did not show any signs of aging. One could also imagine how vigorous and plump the flowers and trees on the mountain were after being nourished by the spring water. Qiyu. The 2 burly men stared at Wu Qi and said, "We are from the Qiyu clan." "What's so strange about that?" "Ugh, why are you looking at me like that? You're asking for a beating." These ancient immortals did not care about their own cultivation base. What they paid attention to was the communication and integration with the heaven and earth, and the unfettered mind they pursued. Their own strength was very weak, and some ancient immortals had even barely reached the level of 36th-tier heaven immortals, barely able to live forever. However, their minds had already become one with the heaven and earth, and every move they made was in accordance with the heavenly Tao. Once they let loose, their destructive power would be absolutely extraordinary. May I ask how I should address you, seniors? Wu Qi had a feeling that something was wrong. These two bull-headed men were too similar to a certain name in his memory. Chapter 778. Qi was not only the name of a man, but also the name of an ancient clan. The members of the Qiyu clan had the human body of a human and the head of a bull. They were born with bronze heads, iron foreheads, and iron bones. They were the race with the strongest fleshly bodies in the world, and their fighting prowess was amazing. They fed on sand and ores, and they could absorb the metal essence in the ores and fuse it into their bodies, forging their muscles and bones to be countless times tougher than metal. The strongest members of the Qiyu clan were not afraid of weapons, and they had the power to move mountains. They were the most fearsome warriors on the battlefield. In the past, one of the Qiyu clan's kings rebelled. He first defeated the Yan Emperor, Shenong, with a sneak attack, and then rose an army to fight with the Yellow Emperor, Xinyuan, for control of Pangu continent. This battle made the Qiyu clan famous, but it also caused the Qiyu clan to be almost wiped out. Fortunately, Emperor Huang Xinyuan always had Qiyu people on duty. When Emperor Huang Xinyuan went out, the Qiyu people would be his personal guards and guards. Even when Qiyu rebelled, this group of Qiyu did not betray the Yellow Emperor, so they kept the Qiyu clan. After so many years of development, the Qiyu clan had grown stronger in Xuanyuan's territory, and they had regained some of their former glory. It was the first time Wu Qi saw the legendary Qiyu clan. He gave them a curiously measuring glance, and as a result, the straightforward Qiyu thought he was provoking them, and nearly gave him a good beating with their fists. Fortunately, Wu Qi had the ability to talk nonsense. Perhaps because these Qiyu had eaten too many metal ores, their skulls were extremely strong and thick, but their brains were not enough. They were overjoyed by his nonsense, and it did not take long for them to regard Wu Qi as a close brother. Laughing and joking, the two Qiyu led Wu Qi to the top of Xinyuan Peak. Along the way, they pointed out the people living on the dozens of mountains near and far, and told him about the checkpoints of various sizes along the way, where there were deities on duty. The two Qiyu were open-mouthed, so they immediately told Wu Qi the secrets of these deities, including the color of their underwear. Wu Qi was amazed by the story. How could an outsider hear such a secret? Thus, he found out from these two ox heads that although the great god Zhong and Li were tall, mighty, and had tyrannical combat strength, they were extremely henpecked. He also heard that god Ing Long, who had helped the Yellow Emperor Xinyuan in the war against Qiyu, had just given birth to his 999th son. But his youngest daughter was a rebellious girl, and she had fallen in love with a mortal on Pangu continent. She was now in her human form and having a good time with him. Then, Emperor Huang Xinyuan was having a headache about the marriage of his youngest princess. It was said that the princess was brave and the only condition for her to choose her husband was to defeat her. However, since she was a child, she had beaten all the deities on Xinyuan Peak, and many mighty deities and generals had fled upon hearing her name. As a result, none of the descendants of the Yellow Emperor's civil and military officials of the right age dared to provoke the little princess. God knew where these two ox heads, who ate ores as their delicacies, got so much gossip. Along the way, Wu Qi listened to them talking about the secrets of the people on Xinyuan Peak. He listened with great interest, and his eyes shone brightly. Amidst the gossip, the two ox heads brought Wu Qi to the front of Xinyuan Palace on the top of Xinyuan Peak. It was obvious that the palace was designed by those ancient immortals. It was simple, dignified, and steady, but there was an air of elegance and magnificence in every detail. It was not as fancy as those immortals' buildings, but it was not as rigid as the buildings of Diyu. Wu Qi had always thought that the architects of Diyu were specialized in making bricks. No matter what palace it was, it looked like blocks of bricks from a distance. Xinyuan Palace was pale gold all over. The main hall was dozens of rows in front and back, and the main hall was towering and tall. Clouds and mist were full of spiritual chi, and huge stone pillars stood everywhere. Dragons such as true dragons, flood dragons, chi dragons, horned dragons, and winged dragons were entwined on them. Ancient strange trees such as Langxian trees were planted everywhere. Phoenixes were perched on the towering wutong trees, and Baifeng was perched on the fiery ironwood trees. Countless divine beasts and birds added a bit of mystery and magnificence to the palace. In the square in front of Xianyuan Palace, a large group of ancient immortals were gathered together, laughing and laughing. They were either playing chess, playing the zither, or setting up a huge stone table and waving their brushes and splashing ink. Naturally, there was a sense of nature among them. There were also some burly divine generals wandering around the square, mingling with these ancient immortals who had nothing to do. The huge square was a mess with people everywhere. There were even some gods who had deliberately kept their beast forms, running around in the crowd. The cries of various beasts and birds filled the ears. The square looked like a vegetable market on earth. No matter how one looked at it, it did not look like a place where a saint emperor of the human race lived. 2 ox-headed men, carrying a stiff-faced Wu Qi, pushed their way through the disorderly ancient immortals and divine generals, and came to the front gate of Xianyuan Palace. 2 burly men, who were over 1,000 feet tall and had extremely well-developed muscles, were leaning lazily against the gate of the Xianyuan Palace. Each of them held a huge wine jar in their hands, gulping down mouthfuls of wine. Even from a long distance away, Wu Qi could smell the strong aroma of wine coming from the jar. It was a truly supreme-grade wine, not something that the sour soup served in Diyu Palace could compare with. Wu Qi could not help but curse the damn tradition of Diyu Palace in his mind. Even the subordinates of the Saint Emperor had been drinking this supreme-grade wine for a long time, so how could they still have the nerve to fool people with that old vinegar soup when serving banquets? The 2 burly men guarding the front gate of Xianyuan Palace had huge bodies, and compared to them, the 2 Qiyu, who stood 60 feet tall, looked like little mice. They did not even notice that someone was standing right in front of them. As for Wu Qi, who was taller than an ordinary man, the 2 burly men did not take him seriously at all. They did not pay any attention to him at all. They only raised their wine jars and kept drinking, letting out thunderous burps from time to time. Under Wu Qi's dumbfounded gaze, one of the ox-headed men pulled out a long-handled axe, flipped it over, and smashed the little toe of the burly man on the left with the back of the axe. A deafening boom rang out. Wu Qi estimated that the force of the axe was about the same as the impact of the meteor that had destroyed Ningbo City many years ago. The face of the burly man, who was drinking wine to his heart's content, suddenly turned purplish red. He lifted the wine jar stiffly, and it took him the time to finish a pot of tea before he let out a miserable howl that shook the heaven and earth. "Oh!" The burly man threw away the wine jar and jumped to his feet, holding his toes. He looked down angrily at the 2 ox-headed men and growled, "You bastards! I'm going to strip you naked and throw you into the dark cold pool at the back of the mountain to soak for 3 days and 3 nights. I'm going to skin all your hair." The ox-headed man with the axe raised his head valiantly and cried out, "There's an urgent military situation. It's a messenger sent by Crown Prince Chongqing. Hurry up and go in to deliver the message. If you delay Crown Prince Chongqing's important matter, your buttocks will blossom." The burly man, who felt a sharp pain in his toes and wished he could skin the 2 ox-headed men alive, was stunned for a moment. "Oh," he answered timidly, then ran into Xianyuan Palace to deliver the message. Wu Qi stared blankly at the scene in front of him. Why did he feel that all the people on Xianyuan Peak were a little stupid? Of course, being simple-minded was a negative word. You could say that these people were simple, honest, kind, and pure. But when a person was too simple, honest, kind, and pure, what else could you be if you weren't simple-minded? The burly man, whose toe was kicked hard and probably had a slight bone fracture, ran into the palace to deliver the message, while the burly man, who was leaning against the palace gate and drinking with him, turned a blind eye to the burly man, raised his wine jar and poured wine into his stomach. Meanwhile, the two ox heads who were responsible for bringing Wu Qi to Xianyuan Palace leaped onto the wine jar held by the burly man, curled up their bodies, and hurriedly leaped into the jar to drink. The burly man stood 1,000 feet tall, and the wine jar in his hand was over 300 feet tall. When the 60 feet tall ox-headed men jumped into the jar, the wine jar was big enough for them to use as a swimming pool. The sound of wine being gulped kept ringing out. Wu Qi scanned the wine jar with his divine sense and found that the two ox-headed men had actually finished all the wine in the jar in just 3 breaths of time. Then, they fell to the bottom of the jar with their bellies propped up and their eyes rolled back. Judging from their flushed faces, it seemed that they were very drunk. Inwardly, Wu Qi gave them a thumbs up. They were the best, absolutely the best. How should he describe the people of Xianyuan Peak? In any case, Wu Qi could not find the words to describe them. Before long, the burly man who ran into Xianyuan Palace just now came running out and cried out, "Prince Chongqing's messenger, come in quickly. The sacred emperor wants to see you." "Where is he? Where is he? Where is the messenger?" The burly man's eyes went wide as he stared blankly into the distance. There was no one in front of him. Wu Qi, who stood over 8 feet tall, gave the burly man a helpless look. He reached out a hand, grabbed a finger-thick strand of leg hair on the burly man's leg, and pulled it out by the root. Feeling the pain, the burly man angrily lowered his head and glared at Wu Qi. Only then did he wake up with a start. Apparently, he had just seen Wu Qi. Wu Qi pointed a finger at his nose feebly and said with a wry smile, "I'm Tan Lang, Marquis of Diu East Sea Province, and I'm Prince Chongqing's messenger." The burly man blinked his eyes in surprise, then said with a frown, "Such a tiny messenger? How much effort did it take you to come here from the ghost realm? You must be exhausted from the journey, right? Hey, how could Prince Chongqing be so cruel? How could a tiny man like you come all the way here?" Shaking his head, the burly man reached out and grabbed Wu Qi, then strode into Xianyuan Palace. Wu Qi was rendered speechless by the burly man. "What the hell is this? Can't I be a messenger just because I'm small?" That was what the burly man was thinking. The smaller a person is, the slower they run? How could those primordial experts feel when they saw that? The burly man brought Wu Qi and sprinted for a long time. Along the way, they passed by several dozens of lofty and solemn palaces, and saw countless strange and bizarre things. Finally, they came to a great hall sitting on top of a huge stone platform, shrouded in clouds, mist, and purple mist. The burly man put Wu Qi down, then led Wu Qi into the hall with a solemn expression. But a casual step from the burly man was enough for Wu Qi to jog for dozens of steps. Wu Qi could not help but shake his head helplessly. The burly man's words did make sense when he could not use any divine abilities or magic. He hurriedly followed the burly man up the tall stone platform and walked into the majestic hall. The hall was large enough to accommodate tens of thousands of people of the burly man's size, so it was easy to tell how large the hall was. Some old men clad in black and white robes stood sparsely in the hall. At the far end of the hall was a throne, on which sat an old man with a benevolent face. He looked no different from any other old man, and was staring at Wu Qi with a gentle look in his eyes, devoid of any pressure or gleam. Wu Qi's heart skipped a beat, and he dropped to his knees almost instinctively. "Your humble subject, Wu Qi, pays respect to the sacred emperor." Chapter 779. Clad in an ordinary white linen shirt, a pair of boots made of fine grass, and a hairpin made of stone, this was the sacred emperor of the human race, the Yellow Emperor Xianyuan. There was no towering arrogance or awe-inspiring majesty. He simply sat there like an old man who had just been chatting with his neighbor, and there was no sign of a legendary mighty figure around him. In the face of such a yellow emperor, Wu Qi felt that he could not lie in front of him, so he simply told him his real name. The Yellow Emperor smiled. He gently patted the armrest of the throne and said, "Diyu is the new Marquis of East Sea Province. Isn't his name Tan Lang?" Wu Qi knelt down and bowed to the Yellow Emperor. "Wu Qi is my real name, and Tan Lang is my master's name," he said in a deep voice. "Oh, I see. The Yellow Emperor nodded and smiled, no longer asking about the matter. It was just a name, and it was not a big deal at all. Whether Wu Qi was called Tan Lang Lu Xiaobai or simply Zhang Xin Li Si Wang Ermatzi, they were all the same to the Yellow Emperor. They were all his descendants, and it was not a big deal. What news does Chongqing want you to bring me? Spreading his arms, the Yellow Emperor smiled at Wu Qi and said, I haven't heard from Chongqing these days. I've sent many people to contact him, but the 3 Buddhas of the Buddhist League are guarding outside the Ghost Realm, cutting off the passage between Pangu Continent and the Ghost Realm. No matter how hard I tried, they couldn't get through. How are you going to come back? Wu Qi fished out a jade slip from under his sleeve and handed it to a spirited old man in white who stood next to the Yellow Emperor, Shenyuan. He was less than 3 feet tall and looked very spirited. The Yellow Emperor called him Feng Ho. Was he the man who created the compass chariot and broke Chiyo's fog formation when the Yellow Emperor was fighting Chiyo? It was said that he was the #1 artifact craftsman serving the Yellow Emperor. He had invented all kinds of strange things, and all kinds of powerful armaments manufactured by Great Yu's military court were based on his ingenious ideas. Feng Ho carefully took the jade slip and handed it to the Yellow Emperor. The Yellow Emperor narrowed his eyes and stroked the jade slip, then his expression changed abruptly. Wu Qi's heart skipped a beat. A military intelligence that could make the Yellow Emperor change his expression like this was obviously not a good sign. Cold sweat oozed out of Wu Qi's back. A planet to settle the heroes of various races from the mortal world? Was it not the same as the Myriad Immortals planet where the people of the 6 dynasties lived? 372 such planets were actually destroyed? Who was the culprit? Emperor Huang Xinyuan lowered his head and pondered for a long time. He shook his head and sighed. I've been too occupied by the Black the Arch these days, so I've neglected this. Myriad Immortal Alliance has been wreaking havoc on Pangu Continent for years. Diyu's attention has been drawn there as well. I'm afraid they haven't found out about this. Emperor Huang Xinyuan snorted coldly, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. Wu Qi suddenly felt an endless pressure sweeping through the huge palace like a blade. He felt a chill all over his body, as if invisible blades were stirring up his internal organs. The invisible pressure ignored Wu Qi's divine abilities and mystic arts and went straight into his body, causing his blood and energy to surge and making him feel very uncomfortable. Wu Qi could not help but be shocked. With just a thought from Emperor Huang Xinyuan, Wu Qi's cultivation base as a second-tier gold immortal was almost non-existent in front of him. What realm had his cultivation base actually reached? After a few cold laughs, Emperor Huang Xinyuan sighed and said, That's not all. I've only suffered a little loss. But the emissaries of the Green Emperor, the Black Emperor, and the White Emperor have been colluding with those old fogies in the past few years? What are they trying to do? A bunch of old fogies actually came to Empress Was Palace, and those bald donkeys actually blocked the main entrance of Empress Was Palace for a year? What are they trying to do? Hearing this, Wu Qi's heart trembled. There was no need to mention Green Emperor, White Emperor, and the Black Emperor. They were all ancient mighty figures who had existed since the beginning of the primordial world, terrifying existences who had gone through countless tribulations without falling. They were much older than Emperor Huang Xinyuan. As for the old fogies mentioned by Emperor Huang Xinyuan, Wu Qi could not estimate what kind of people they were. To Wu Qi, Emperor Huang Xinyuan was already a legendary figure, and he really did not know what kind of people those so-called old fogies were. As for who the master of Empress Was Palace was, there was no need to mention it. In the ancient times, many great sages worked together to create humans, and those great sages only created human bodies. The one who filled the human bodies with souls was the master of Empress Was Palace, Goddess Nuwa. A few bald donkeys dared to block the main entrance of Empress Was Palace for a year? Was it the current Lord Buddha of Buddhism, Amitabha? Did he have the courage to do so? If it was not Amitabha, then who was it? Could there be someone in the Buddhism League who was stronger and had a higher status than Amitabha? Staring blankly at Emperor Huang Xinyuan, Wu Qi heard many questions in his murmur. But it was clear that no one was willing to explain them to Wu Qi. After all, he was only Diyu, a little marquis of East Sea Province. Those who were qualified to meddle in these affairs had to be kings of the imperial clan like King Yangshan, who held great power and had a strong enough cultivation base. Just as Wu Qi's eyes darted back and forth, unable to figure out what was going on, Emperor Huang Xianyuan gently waved his palm and sent out a gentle but powerful force to help Wu Qi up from his knees. "You don't have to go to Liangzhu," said Emperor Huang Xianyuan in a deep voice. "I'll tell Emperor Haozuan what happened here. Hee, not even Emperor Haozuan can do anything about it, so it's not something that you can meddle in." After pondering for a moment, Emperor Huang Xianyuan narrowed his eyes and asked Wu Qi, "I learned a few days ago that a group of divine beasts had stopped you outside Yuxiong Plain?" Wu Qi was taken aback, then he slapped the back of his head. A plume of dark smoke rose from the top of his head, and the dark celestial tower flew out with a deep whistle. A gust of cold air sprayed out from the bottom of the tower, and the unconscious divine beasts who had come to pick a fight with Wu Qi, including Bai Zhu and Bai Air, flew out of the tower, and even the 2-star golden rhinoceroses fell heavily to the ground. Since Wu Qi had subdued these divine beasts, he had imprisoned them in the dark celestial tower. Because of the restrictive force, all their souls had fallen into a deep sleep, so they had been unconscious all this time. Emperor Huang Xianyuan sneered, "What a great scheme! The death of a mere sovereign of the myriad immortal alliance is nothing to me, but I can't believe they want to drag the descendants of Green Emperor, White Emperor, and Black Emperor down with him. Including Prabhudaratna Buddha, what are they planning to do with such a small sacrifice?" Wu Qi stood to one side and said nothing. He was quickly analyzing the details of the matter from Emperor Huang Xuanyuan's words. Emperor Huang Xianyuan frowned and looked up at the ceiling of the hall. There was a star map of the sun, moon, and stars on it. All the stars in the star map were slowly moving according to the orbit of the real stars in the sky. It was mysterious and full of an indescribable charm. After pondering for a long time, Emperor Huang Xianyuan finally said, "Leave these divine beasts here, Wu Qi. I have a use for them." With just one sentence, he was about to take away dozens of gold immortal divine beasts that Wu Qi had subdued, but Wu Qi did not complain at all. He said respectfully, "You can do whatever you want with them, Sacred Emperor." Emperor Huang Xianyuan smiled. After rummaging in his sleeve for a while, he grabbed 108 swords that looked like they were made of blue crystal and threw them to Wu Qi. The swords, which were as light as goose feathers, flew to Wu Qi's side and slowly floated around him. Emperor Huang Xianyuan smiled and said, "Here are 108 Kunwu swords." Now that some people had begun to block the gate of Empress Hua Palace, did it mean that their plan was aimed at the human race? Wu Qi was deeply worried, but when he saw the 108 Kunwu swords floating around him, his mood suddenly became better. Kunwu swords were a famous divine artifact from the ancient times. How powerful were they exactly? Chapter 780. As soon as Wu Qi and Feng Ho were sent out of the Great Hall, they heard a melodious immortal tune ringing out of it. Surrounded by thousands of ancient immortals and tens of thousands of deities, 6 flood dragons pulled a dazzling chariot and rose into the sky, spewing clouds of light and auspicious mist. The Yellow Emperor, Xianyuan, had changed into an emperor's outfit and was emanating a great pressure that no one dared to look directly at him. Sitting in the chariot with a sullen face, his vast aura made the entire Xianyuan peak tremble. A ring of golden light radiated out from the back of his head like a sun, radiating tens of thousands of miles in circumference. A dense purple mist spewed out of it, blotting out half of the sky. It was a glorious scene that could not be described with words unless one saw it with one's own eyes. The fleet flew hundreds of miles up into the sky, surrounded by purple clouds. The bronze chariots came whistling over, surrounded by the front, back, left, and right of the fleet, flying up into the sky together. Each of the 4 armies had 100,000 chariots, and each chariot was manned by 2 chariots, 1 divine general, 12 deities, and 36 soldiers. The total number of the 4 armies was more than 10 million. Wu Qi sucked in a cold breath. The man in the linen robe and straw sandals just now was not the Yellow Emperor Shenyuan. This was the aura that the sacred emperor of the human race should have. Once he set out, he would be guarded by tens of millions of deities, and the light of virtue would illuminate the void. Compared to this majestic aura, the sovereign of the myriad immortal alliance and the Buddhas of the Buddhist League whom Wu Qi had seen in the past, who were also shrouded in auspicious light and auspicious mist, could not even compare to the little finger of the Yellow Emperor Shenyuan. With his excellent eyesight, Wu Qi saw that wherever the chariot passed, all the natural barriers in the sky that could give even gold immortals headaches disappeared. Whether it was the wind, the lightning, the xianbing, or the aurora, they all calmed down in front of the chariot. Wherever the golden aura passed, the natural barriers that sealed off the sky above Pangu continent dispersed like snow being poured into boiling water, and the natural energy became peaceful. As he stared at the Yellow Emperor's chariot in a daze, someone suddenly pulled Wu Qi's trousers a few times. Feng Ho looked up and stared at Wu Qi. "Boy, come back to your senses," he cried. "This is the Emperor's traveling light. If you saw the chariot of millions of deities following behind him when he was conquering the world, wouldn't you be scared out of your wits?" Feng Ho jumped up and kicked Wu Qi in the shin, then stroked his long white beard and said with a smile, "Hurry up, I'll teach you the fiend slaying sword formation, so you can go and have a drink with those old immortals." "Tiske, the Emperor has gone to see Empress Hua. I don't know when he will come back, so I can take the chance to slack off. Hee, is your brain working well? If not, I don't know when you will be able to learn it." Wu Qi's brain worked very well. His innate chaotic divine soul was comparable in nature to the immortal soul of a primordial expert, although it was not as strong. However, he had devoured so many evil spirits and soul fragments that his divine sense was much stronger than those peak-level gold immortals. Therefore, Wu Qi's brain worked very well. Basically, anything he saw would be immediately comprehended by him. However, the fiend-slaying sword formation was a secret formation that the Yellow Emperor Shenyuan used to kill the rebellious Qiyu clan in ancient times. It was filled with endless mysteries, and was even more complicated than the so-called cosmic star formation. The cosmic star formation only used tens of thousands of stars in the universe, but the fiend-slaying sword formation not only used the stars, but also took into account the changes of the natural energies of earth, water, fire, wind, and countless other factors, such as the terrain and underground veins. It was an indefinite sword formation. The more factors one used to form the formation, the stronger it would be. If one could fuse all the great Taos of the universe into the sword formation, it would have the power to break the chaos and destroy a world. In other words, if one fused the great Tao of the universe into the sword formation, the sword energy would be able to shatter the stars. If one fused the great Tao of the universe into the sword formation, they would be able to manifest the power of the four elements and form the true forms of the sacred beasts of the four directions to attack others. If one could fuse space and time into the sword formation, they would be able to control time and shatter the void at will. If one could fuse the terrain of the earth veins into the formation, they would be able to play with the world at will. Apart from these natural heavenly Taos, one could also fuse countless living beings such as humans, deities, immortals, ghosts, and many others into the formation to form it. The foundation of such a huge and complicated sword formation was the 108 Kunwu swords. The complexity of the fiend-slaying sword formation was beyond Wu Qi's expectation, as it could manifest almost all the great Taos of the entire universe with the Kunwu swords. Even with his vast divine sense and Feng Ho's teachings, it took him 7 days and 7 nights just to memorize the most basic and original formation diagram of the sword formation. He could not make any calculations or make any changes. A vast amount of mysterious information filled Wu Qi's divine soul. Wu Qi felt like a fat man who had eaten too much. His vision darkened, and sweat kept breaking out all over his body. His divine soul was so congested that he even forgot his own name. With the cultivation base of the Yellow Emperor Shenyuan, how heavy must the Kunwu swords he controlled be? Qiyu must have been in great pain when he was struck by a sword like that, right? Like fish swimming in a clear stream, the Kunwu swords wheeled back and forth around Wu Qi with the energies of the 5 elements, gradually activating the power of heaven and earth. Wave after wave of incomparably sharp sword intent spread out in all directions, sharp and suffocating, forcing Feng Ho and the few ancient immortals who were watching Wu Qi practicing the sword formation in the square to step back. After teaching Wu Qi the profound knowledge of the fiend-slaying sword formation for a few days, Feng Ho squatted on the head of a blue tiger and watched with a smile as Wu Qi gradually practiced the sword formation from rusty to proficient. He nodded lightly, then whispered to the few ancient immortals around him, "My emperor really has a good eye for talent. None of those lads on Shenyuan Peak could inherit my emperor's Tao of military formation, but this lad is not bad. He can really master the sword formation." The few ancient immortals nodded and smiled as well. They looked at Wu Qi, then at a group of deity generals who were flaunting their prowess at the edge of the square, comparing their muscles with each other, and could not help but sigh at the same time. Apart from these violent men, the Yellow Emperor Shenyuan also had many talented men. For example, Crown Prince Chongqing was a handsome and talented man of his time. But these people were not interested in the Tao of military formation, because the fiend-slaying sword formation was actually taught to Wu Qi, an outsider. After immersing himself in the sword formation for half a month, Wu Qi finally took a deep breath and drew back the purple energy around him. Kunwu swords, which had been hovering around Wu Qi like fish, entered Wu Qi's body along with the purple energy, hiding in his acupoints and allowing him to nourish them with his own blood essence. While Wu Qi was nourishing them with his blood essence, they were also absorbing the natural energy between heaven and earth, feeding back extremely pure energy to strengthen Wu Qi's fleshly body and divine soul. Kunwu swords were not just weapons of killing. After taking them into his body, Wu Qi immediately sensed the great benefits they brought him. Even the Pangu's sacred energy in him had become much purer after being purified by them. Feng Ho, who had been watching Wu Qi perform the sword formation, jumped down from the green tiger's head. He took small steps and came before Wu Qi, then asked with a smile, "I've taught you the sword formation. But how well you use it in practice will depend on your own ability. Well, there's nothing for you to do here, so hurry up and do what you need to do." A few ancient immortals had already brought out tables and wooden stools with smiles on their faces and placed wine jars and side dishes on them. Obviously, they were going to have a good drink with Feng Ho. While talking to Wu Qi, Feng Ho kept turning his head to look at the few ancient immortals. Obviously, his mind was not on Wu Qi at all. Shaking his numb head, Wu Qi blinked his dry eyelids, then bowed respectfully to Feng Ho and said, "Thank you for your advice, old mister." Feng Ho waved his hand impatiently and said, "Go away, don't talk so much. Just remember what His Majesty wants you to do, and don't mess it up." Feng Ho swallowed a mouthful of saliva and stared at the wine jars taken out by the few ancient immortals. Wu Qi smiled and bowed to Feng Ho again, then walked out of Shenyuan Peak accompanied by a few Qiyu clansmen. His divine soul was still filled with the endless mysteries of the fiend-slaying sword formation, but Wu Qi's heart was filled with joy. During this trip to Shenyuan Peak, Wu Qi had gained too many things. The Yellow Emperor had given him the Kunwu swords and taught him the fiend-slaying sword formation. What did this mean? Wu Qi was a little complacent. Not many people in Dayu's imperial court could enjoy such treatment, could they? With a belly full of joy, Wu Qi left Shenyuan Peak and hurried to the East Sea province with his divine ability. Chapter 781. While Wu Qi was studying the sword formation on Shenyuan Peak, Princess Zhonglu was facing a crisis. Both Liu Bang and King Zhangqiu had taken a fancy to Princess Zhonglu, but neither of them was a man who would give in easily, and they were both ruthless and resolute men. Therefore, Liu Bang immediately unleashed the sky-veiling flag of chaos and swung it down at Princess Zhonglu. As the flag flashed, the void above Princess Zhonglu and the others suddenly turned pitch black. All the natural energy was absorbed by the flag, and in an instant, the space around them turned into a vacuum, with even the air being sucked away. An invisible restrictive force had locked everyone's body tightly like iron chains. In the next moment, a shadowy shadow was seen thrusting towards Princess Zhongli's head like a long whip. It was the sky-veiling flag of primordial chaos that was absorbing the spirit chi of heaven and earth and imprisoning everyone's bodies. It was the flagpole of the sky-veiling flag of primordial chaos that was turning into a steel whip and lashing down. The flag was the spirit treasure of the Emperor of the Celestial Court, a spirit artifact of chaos. Even though Lu Bang could not control it at will, it still possessed a terrible power that could frighten even ghosts and deities away. A loud noise rang out as a dark curtain of light was torn open in the void, through which countless streaks of colorful light could be seen streaking across like shooting stars. Princess Zhongli snorted. She looked up at the sky and pointed a finger at it. Suddenly, a great sheet of white gold energy burst out of the five-colored divine light, condensing into a living silver lotus flower over her head, wrapping it in a five-colored light as it flew toward the flagpole. The innate gold and silver lotus had been refined by Princess Zhongli day and night, and now it was completely under her control, allowing her to unleash 100% of its power. Although the sky-veiling flag of chaos was a spirit artifact of chaos, it was not in the hands of its master. Therefore, Lu Bang could only unleash less than 1/10,000th of its power. The two extraordinary treasures collided with each other. The cloud under Princess Zhongli's feet suddenly dispersed, and her body was sent flying down for hundreds of feet before she finally stabilized her body. A vast and inexhaustible force followed the connection between her divine soul and the silver lotus and struck towards her divine soul, but in the blink of an eye, it was sliced into pieces by countless sharp auras. Wave after wave of spiritual power continuously attacked Princess Zhongli's sea of consciousness, but the spiritual power that was cut apart was fragmented. Princess Zhongli's sea of consciousness was vast and tough, and firmly withstood this wave of attack. Meanwhile, the sky-veiling flag of chaos was sent flying tens of miles into the air, its pole trembling and letting out a deep cry. Following the faint connection between Lu Bang and the sky-veiling flag of chaos, a great sheet of gray divine power wrapped in dozens of gleaming white blades and slashed toward Lu Bang. Shrill cracking noises kept ringing out as the invisible restrictive spells used by Lu Bang and King Zhangqiu to cover their tracks were torn to shreds by the extremely sharp gold element energies. Countless beams of cold light flashed in front of their eyes, frightening them into flying into the sky with all their attendants. Miserable howls rang through the sky as King Zhangqiu and Lu Bang's attendants were torn to pieces by the blades condensed of gold element energies. Wherever the bright blades passed, all the immortal items and magical treasures were sliced flat. Even the upper-grade heaven immortal items wielded by a few female immortals around Lu Bang were sliced in half like tofu, and these beautiful female immortals were also cut in half at the waist. The gray divine power transformed into tiny tornadoes and rose into the sky, quickly enveloping Lu Bang, King Zhangqiu, and the others. Suddenly, a great plume of black flame sprayed out of King Zhangqiu's body. He grunted under his breath as 2 streams of blood gushed out of his nostrils. He locked his hands into an incantation gesture and recited an incantation under his breath, silently expelling the divine power of the god of Scourge that had invaded his body. From time to time, bumps the size of fists popped out of his skin and flowed like living creatures. King Zhangqiu trembled violently. Not daring to be careless, he used the power of the ghost god he worshipped to fight against the divine power of the god of Scourge. But the military officers who came with him did not have the same cultivation base as King Zhangqiu. Several of them, whose cultivation bases had reached the realm of the second Panga heaven, had blood of a strange color spray out of their 7 orifices at the same time. Then, all kinds of strange ailments emerged in their internal organs. Strange ailments such as knots in their intestines, shortness of breath in their lungs, and sagging livers swarmed over them, causing them to break out in cold sweat and fall to the ground, unable to move. Lu Bang was so frightened that he gave a strange cry and cried out, "This is not good. We need to get out of here now. Why does that girl have an innate treasure as well?" Before Lu Bang, who had transformed into a stream of light and was flying up into the sky, could finish his words, a huge meteor suddenly emerged hundreds of feet over his head. The meteor, composed entirely of high-density metal, came smashing down at great speed and smashed heavily on Lu Bang's head. Lu Bang howled miserably as the top of his skull was smashed to a pulp. Blood and brain matter sprayed out in all directions, and half of his body was almost shattered by the meteor. It was unknown what kind of cultivation technique Lu Bang had practiced, but when the meteor smashed half of his body to pieces, there were wisps of starlight drifting down from the void, quickly mixing with the blood and minced flesh that sprayed out of Lu Bang's mouth, outlining the shattered half of his body. A powerful stream of star power rushed into Lu Bang's body, mixed with an extremely strong aura of life. Lu Bang's body recovered quickly, and he gave a strange cry as he hurriedly leaped to the side. The meteor that had almost killed Lu Bang fell heavily to the ground and smashed into the bodies of King Zhangqiu and the few military officers who came with him, whose bodies had been invaded by the god of Scourge's power. The earth shook violently, and the land 1,000 miles in circumference collapsed abruptly. The meteor plunged more than 1,000 miles deep into the ground, and lava and poisonous flames gushed out of the ground at the same time. King Zhangqiu and the other military officers had strong fleshly bodies, but they were still alive after being smashed into the ground by the meteor and burned by the lava and poisonous flames for a long time. Howling, they struggled to their feet and returned to King Zhangqiu's side. In the distance, Princess Zhongli's eyes shone with a strong 7-colored light. Like 2 searchlights, they tore through thousands of miles of space in a flash and shone on Lu Bang and King Zhangqiu. Princess Zhongli gave a cold snort. With a gentle flip of her hand, the tens of thousands of mountains in her interstitial world began to sway together, each sending half of their energy to Princess Zhongli. The shadow of a mountain quickly took shape in her small, fair palm. Then, Princess Zhongli beckoned at the silver lotus over her head. A great stream of silver light flew out of the petals of the lotus and fused into the shadow of the mountain. A cold laugh rang out as Princess Zhongli waved her hand. The fist-sized mountain spun into the sky and disappeared in the blink of an eye. The next moment, the mountain reappeared over King Zhangqiu's head and smashed down toward his head with a strong gust of wind. Princess Zhongli had created her own interstitial world and possessed the ability to manipulate the power of the world. This was the main reason why she was able to unleash such a mighty power even though she had just stepped into the realm of Gold Immortals. As for other Gold Immortals, even if they were peak-level Gold Immortals, if they had not created their own interstitial world, their overall strength would never be as strong as Princess Zhongli, even if their immortal energy was thousands of times stronger than Princess Zhongli's. The tens of thousands of mountains in her interstitial world were looted by Princess Zhongli and Wu Qi from Myriad Immortals Planet and other planets. These mountains had sent half of their energy to Princess Zhongli, so the mountain she had condensed was equivalent to tens of thousands of huge mountains smashing down at the same time. In particular, she had injected a large amount of golden heptachi into the hill. This hill was not only heavy to the extreme, but also sharp to the extreme. When King Zhangqiu heard a gust of wind coming from the top of his head, he hurriedly looked up and saw a fist-sized, translucent mountain smashing down on his head. A deafening boom rang out as a column of flame towered into the sky from the top of King Zhangqiu's head, sending a great amount of blood flying hundreds of miles away. King Zhangqiu's tall body was smashed deep into the ground, enveloped by the poisonous magma and burned violently. A palm-sized piece of skull on his forehead was smashed into pieces. The terrifying force rushed into his skull and almost crushed his brain. King Zhangqiu let out a miserable howl. Princess Zhongli's attack was so terrible that even though his fleshly body had reached the 8 stars realm of the second Panga heaven, his head was nearly smashed by Princess Zhongli's attack. He was different from Lu Bang. Lu Bang could save his life with an immortal magic, but if King Zhangqiu's head was smashed, he would die on the spot, and a wisp of his soul would have to enter transmigration and be reincarnated. Drenched in sweat, King Zhangqiu howled as he shot up into the sky from the magma. Behind him, a round bone talisman, tens of feet in circumference, shone with a dazzling light and quickly formed a small door of light. Together with a few captains who came with him, King Zhangqiu smashed into the door and disappeared without a trace. The door of light quickly disintegrated into streams of light and dissipated. Seeing that King Zhangqiu had fled with the help of the talisman, Liu Bang cursed in exasperation. Ignoring the fate of the beautiful fairies around him, he fled into the distance like a stray dog. The hill that had severely wounded King Zhangqiu spun up into the sky, and in the blink of an eye, it had arrived at Liu Bang's back. As the hill pressed down, a plume of black smoke rose from Liu Bang's body. The sky-veiling flag of chaos transformed into a thick black mist and wrapped around Liu Bang. No matter how the hill smashed Liu Bang a dozen times, it still could not hurt Liu Bang. Princess Zhongli's breath had run out. She scolded in a low voice, then opened her mouth and sucked the hill back from thousands of miles away. Then she grabbed the hill and pulled it back into her interstitial world. The power of the earth energy veins quickly returned to the mountains, and for a moment, a rumbling noise rang out from Princess Zhongli's body, sounding extremely frightening. Yu Mu, who was fighting with Yu Mu and others, frowned. He glanced into the distance and cursed in a low voice, "Don't meddle in these muddy waters." The soul of Ying Long fell whistling down from above. Yu Mu had planned to capture Princess Zhonglu alive with the soul of Ying Long, but when he saw that Princess Zhonglu actually possessed such a divine ability and magic power, which allowed her to force King Zhangqiu and Liu Bang to flee in panic with just the overall strength of a gold immortal, everyone present had witnessed it with their own eyes. Hesitantly, Yu Mu beckoned at the soul of Ying Long and summoned it back into the space above his head. He was not sure if he could withstand the blow from the hill, especially since he had the body of an immortal, which was definitely not as strong as King Zhangqiu's. All his abilities were based on the gourd, and he did not have any other immortal items with him. With a cold snort, Yu Mu steered the gourd and was about to flee. But how could Princess Zhonglu allow him to do that? Countless fine beams of silver light shot out of the silver lotus over her head, turning into a rain of swords that rained down on Yu Mu's head. "Yu Mu, you old thief, die!" Princess Zhonglu said with a cold snort. While Princess Zhonglu was chasing after Yu Mu relentlessly, a cold snort suddenly came from the void, and in the next moment, a huge black hand came pressing down from above. When everyone looked up quickly, they saw a deity standing 100 miles tall in the sky, standing on two black flood dragons and thrusting his palm down angrily. Chapter 782. With a cold snort, the god, who stood 100 miles tall and whose skin was as dark as coal, and who stood on two black flood dragons, had his huge palm pressing down on everyone. He did not care who was right or wrong, and his attack included everyone down below. The huge palm compressed the air, and a thick layer of white wind emerged in the palm. Amidst a deep, muffled whistle, the air around them became as hard as steel, making it difficult for them to breathe. Yu Miao looked up at the god, then roared furiously, "Which great emperor's ancient god are you? How dare you invade the territory of Diyu?" Amidst the roar, a plume of white smoke rose thousands of feet high from the top of Yu Miao's head, on top of which hovered a ferocious ghost head. The ghost head's eyes were wide open, gleaming with a cold gleam as it fixed its gaze on the god's huge palm. The speed of the palm, which was falling like Mount Tai, became extremely slow, pressing down almost inch by inch. The god snorted in surprise, while Yu Miao's body trembled. The tremendous pressure made his blood and energy surge, and his face turned purplish red. The god did not answer Yu Miao's question. He just laughed evilly, and the two flood dragons under his feet gave a strange cry. Suddenly, the ground around them collapsed, forming a bottomless pit tens of thousands of miles in circumference. Even the dozens of nearby cities disappeared without a trace. Thick water vapor turned into a black mist and sprayed out of the pit. Dark clouds wheeled around the crowd, and in the blink of an eye, the whole world was enveloped. The temperature in the surroundings plummeted, and the water vapor in the dark clouds gradually condensed into frost. Large sheets of snowflakes fell from the sky, and when they touched the bodies of the people, they immediately turned into white cold air and squeezed into their bodies, freezing their skin and muscles. The soldiers sent by Gao and the private soldiers of Yu clan were shivering in the cold, and some soldiers with weaker cultivation bases shivered and even fainted. The sound of teeth chattering could be heard everywhere. Some of the fainted soldiers were covered with a thin layer of ice, and as their body temperature dropped rapidly, they soon lost all signs of life. Their life force was gradually draining from their bodies, and they were about to be frozen to death. The soul of Ing Dragon was wheeling around Yu Miao, Yu Mu, and the others. Ing Dragons were the gods of water, so the surrounding water vapor and ice did not affect them much. On top of that, Yu Miao's gourd kept spewing out high-temperature flames, driving away the occasional wisps of cold air that occasionally seeped into the cave. Yu Mu looked up at the giant god and cried out, "My lord, I have no enmity with you. Whether you are seeking revenge or doing something else, could you please allow me to leave with these juniors?" Slowly pressing his palm down inch by inch, the god snorted coldly and said, "How do I know if you have no enmity with me? Today, everyone here obediently surrender, and I'll let you live for a few more days. Whoever dares to act recklessly, don't blame me for being ruthless." The huge palm pressing down on the crowd was wrapped in a layer of strong water, and the force pressing down suddenly increased by a few times. Yu Miao's body trembled, and the white mist above his head shrank by more than half. The ferocious ghost head became weak, and the cold gleam shooting out of its eyes gradually faded away. It seemed that Yu Miao had lost the strength to hold on any longer. The three elders of the Yu clan, who were close to the realm of supreme oracles, struck at the same time. Black, white, and green lights burst out of their bodies, turning into 3 beams of light that shot straight into the sky. Vaguely, the figures of all kinds of ghosts and deities could be seen looming in the beams of light. "Is my lord unreasonable?" cried the 3 elders in unison. The god frowned and thought for a while. Then he stopped and said slowly, "Reason with me? What is reasonable? You have imprisoned so many divine beasts of my emperor and killed their children for no reason. What reason do I have?" With a cold snort, the god pressed his right hand down again. Yu Miao and the 3 elders joined hands, but they could hardly stop his palm from pressing down. A few beams of light were crushed and creaked noisily, while Yu Miao and the others trembled violently and broke out in cold sweat. This god was not a newborn god like the ones Wu Qi had killed in those years, but a real ancient god who had survived from the ancient times. Those newborn gods had not even fully formed their bodies, let alone master the laws of heaven and earth that they were born with, forming their golden bodies and mastering their real power. When they were born, they were nothing but wisps of energy, and did not even have a human form. Their overall strength was so weak that even the wind could melt them. When they formed their bodies, they would be able to walk around like a living person, and possess the strength equal to that of an ordinary cultivator or even a heaven immortal. When they formed their golden bodies, it would prove that they had mastered the laws of heaven and earth that they owned, and would possess the overall strength equal to that of a gold immortal. After attaining the overall strength of a gold immortal, the overall strength of a god would basically reach its limit. If they wanted to improve their overall strength, they could only rely on a long period of time to gradually comprehend the laws of heaven and earth that they were born with and derive stronger laws from them. For example, among the gods who were born with the laws of fire, some gods might only possess an ordinary law of fire, but the so-called superhuman aptitude and excellent bloodline possessed the laws of innate fire, such as the divine flame of order and the divine flame of void. The gods who mastered ordinary flames could at most cause a forest fire to hurt mortals. But the gods who mastered the power of innate divine flames could threaten existences like primordial immortals with just a casual strike. As time went by, their mastery of the laws became more and more thorough, and their power naturally grew stronger and stronger. In addition to tapping into the power of the laws, gods could also constantly strengthen their bodies to accommodate more divine power, and thus become stronger and stronger. In the ancient times, the most powerful gods who had fallen in the war against human beings were tens of thousands of miles tall, and the divine power in their bodies was almost inexhaustible. Even if they compressed their divine bodies could still be hundreds of miles long. Therefore, experienced people could tell the power of a god from the size of his body at a glance. The god hovering above them now was 100 miles tall, with strange black ripples flowing on the surface of his skin, and the void around him was swaying. Clearly, he had compressed his body with a mystic art, which was why he could maintain a body that was 100 miles long. In other words, his true divine body was far longer than 100 miles, and a god of this height could never be one of those newborn gods. He could only be a formidable existence left behind in the ancient times. Such a god might not be as powerful as a primordial immortal in terms of divine power, but in terms of the power represented by the laws of heaven and earth, even ordinary primordial immortals could not compare with him. Immortals borrowed the power of heaven and earth, but gods themselves were part of the laws of heaven and earth, their true forms condensed by the laws of heaven and earth. Their mastery of power was beyond the imagination of ordinary immortals. The enormous pressure emanated by the palm made you moo and the others sweat profusely. But the temperature kept dropping as the dark mist lingered in the air. Their sweat quickly turned into ice, and soon, the four of them were wrapped in ice. Large sheets of snowflakes kept falling from the sky, and every snowflake that fell on them turned into wisps of cold air, drilling into their bodies and gradually freezing them. Yu Miao began to recite an incantation. He wanted to summon the ghosts and deities they worshipped to fight against the ancient god. He had heard about the ancient god imprisoning the divine beasts and killing their children. Wasn't that what Wu Qi had done? Now that Wu Qi was missing, the backers of those divine beasts had come to him. No matter why they had the confidence to invade Dayu's territory to vent their anger, this ancient god had undoubtedly found the right place. Princess Zhonglu was Wu Qi's woman, and Yu Miao was close to Wu Qi as well. This ancient god had found the right person to cause them trouble. The question was, how did he know that it was Wu Qi who had done that, and how did he find Princess Zhonglu and Yu Miao so accurately? Yu Miao's incantation turned into a deep rumble of thunder and spread out in all directions, but it was frozen by the cold air and soon dissipated in the air. A soft, cold energy sealed off the surrounding void, and the power of Yu Miao's incantation could not penetrate it. Since he could not summon the ghosts and deities he worshipped, he naturally could not get his power to fight against the enemy. A soft cry rang out as the silver lotus flower hovering above Princess Zhonglu unleashed countless silver lights, which transformed into flying swords and slashed toward the ancient god. However, the ancient god's body rippled with endless layers of water light. The flying sword pierced through layer after layer of water ripples. Each layer of water ripples dimmed the light of the flying sword. As a result, when it was still several feet away from the ancient god's body, the flying sword completely dissipated. The golden heptachi was swallowed up by the black water ripples, but it increased the power of the water ripples. The ancient god gave a hideous grin and murmured in a low voice, "This place has been completely sealed off by some black water fiend formation. No one will answer your call to heaven and earth. Just wait for your death. Girl, I can't believe you have awakened your ancient bloodline. Come back with me, and the child you and I will give birth to will surely be a mighty god." Princess Zhongli's face flickered. The silver lotus flower was the most powerful magical artifact she had, but even it could not defeat the ancient god. Gold element gave birth to water, and the energy of gold element did not pose too much of a threat to this ancient god, who was obviously born from the law of water. Instead, the energy of gold element would be used to evolve into innate water and increase his power. The tens of thousands of miles wide crater revealed by the collapse of the Earth had turned into a vast black ocean. Dense water vapor rose from the surface of the water and condensed into thousands of huge flags hovering in the air. As the flags fluttered slowly, countless bone-piercing snowflakes sprinkled down from the sky and stuck to the bodies of the people. A cracking noise rang out as the armors of the few captains sent by Gao standing next to Princess Zhonglu were shattered. Shivering, they fell to the ground and were gradually covered by layers of ice. Princess Zhonglu arched her brows. The silver lotus flower emitted a large sheet of five-colored light and enveloped them. But in the face of the endless snowflakes, the light was eroded layer by layer by the cold air and grew dimmer. Princess Zhonglu felt helpless. Seeing that Yu Miao and the others were suffocating under the pressure, she could only reach out a hand and make a grabbing gesture, enveloping Yu Miao and the others in the five-colored light. The elders of Yu clan, their private army, and the army sent by Gao were all protected by Princess Zhonglu with her divine ability, which saved them from being frozen to death on the spot. The ancient god saw that Princess Zhonglu had protected the people and that he was in Yu's blessed land, but he did not panic at all. Instead, he slowly operated the formation and summoned countless snowflakes to envelop the people. The land tens of thousands of miles in circumference was enveloped by a dense layer of water vapor, so no one could see what was happening inside. Occasionally, the ancient god would let out a deep laugh, which was filled with endless complacency and expectation. Chapter 783. Oh ha! The muscles in Wu Qi's legs twitched as a powerful fluctuation of the earth veins rushed up to his head with a loud rumble. The scorching Pangu's sacred energy washed his body, making him sweat profusely. A large amount of Pangu's sacred energy had fused with his fleshly body, expelling the waste produced by his metabolism. A rumble echoed out from the earth veins as Wu Qi's body flashed and tore through the void, flying 10 billion miles away in the blink of an eye. His body was boiling hot, and his blood vessels and meridians were stretched to their fullest. Surging energy was circulating in his body. Nearly half of the remains of the ancient immortals in his interstitial world had been refined, and 30% of the enormous willpower from Buddha Futu had been digested by his divine soul. Stimulated by the Pangu's sacred energy, both his fleshly body and magic power were growing rapidly. Wu Qi felt as if he had grown a pair of wings on his back, making him feel as if he was about to fly. Like 108 perpetual motion machines, the Kunwu swords rapidly extracted the Pangu's sacred energy gushing out of the earth veins, purified them, and injected them into Wu Qi's body. The speed at which a single Kunwu sword extracted the Pangu's sacred energy was several times faster than Wu Qi's own cultivation. With 108 Kunwu swords working at the same time, Wu Qi's cultivation base skyrocketed. Wisps of green light shot out of 108 vital meridians on his body, and the dragon-like Pangu's sacred energy was sucked into his body. Wherever Wu Qi passed, there was no more purple energy within 10,000 miles of him. It was a terrifying sight. It had taken Wu Qi more than a month to reach the land of Sacred Emperor, but it only took him 7 days to return to Zhong province. With a long roar, Wu Qi rushed past Zhongning city. His divine sense swept across the city, and he was immediately alerted by the unusual changes in Yu clan's mansion. A few oracles from the Yu clan in Liangzhu were talking about the recent changes, and it was only then that Wu Qi learned that the visit of Princess Zhonglu had caused Yu Miao and Yu Mu to fall out with each other and split the Yu clan in Zhong province. Now, Princess Zhonglu was working with Yu Mu and the others to hunt Yu Miao and his companions all over the world. Zi Xian is quite capable. In this way, if I go out, I won't have to worry about my foundation being unstable. Wu Qi laughed out loud. He stopped and took out a jade talisman from his sleeve, which was used to contact Princess Zhonglu. With a point of his finger, a beam of light shot into the talisman. But after the time it took to drink a cup of tea, there was no movement from the talisman. Wu Qi was shocked. This talisman was refined by him after he had the cultivation of a golden immortal. Even if they were 1 trillion miles apart, he could quickly contact Princess Zhonglu. Now, the talismans didn't respond at all. Either the talismans in Princess Zhonglu's hands were destroyed, or there was an array formation that isolated the response between the talismans. Regardless of the situation, Princess Zhonglu's current situation was not good. Wu Qi quickly sent his divine sense in the direction of the East Sea province. The divine sense of a second-tier gold immortal could not reach the level where he could see everything in the universe at a glance, but any second-tier gold immortal could easily cover an entire galaxy with his divine sense. On Pangu continent, a divine sense of this level could easily cover at least 1,000 provinces. The East Sea province was not far from Zhong province, separated by only a dozen provinces. As Wu Qi's divine sense was far stronger than that of an ordinary second-tier gold immortal, he immediately knew everything that was happening in the East Sea province. Lord Xianxing was training his army under the East Sea, while his father was drinking and having fun with a few old dragon kings in the Great Hall. The few old dragon kings were holding beautiful dragon girls and clam demons in their arms, as if they were preparing to give Lord Xianxing a few younger brothers and sisters. Goldhorn and Silverhorn were lying on a pile of dead beasts, snoring loudly as if they were sleepwalking, opening their mouths from time to devour the bodies. It had been more than a year since they last saw each other, and the brothers had grown much fatter, especially their bellies, which were dozens of times thicker than the rest of their bodies. Catfish lay sprawled in a remote pool in the East Sea province. A group of aquatic demons from Underhand's sect was wiping her scales and pouring vats of wine into her mouth. Beside the pool, a tiger demon who had lived for many years was seriously grilling fat and sheep. From time to time, some little demons would rush over and quickly grab the meat that was spitting grease and feed it into Catfish's mouth. Other longbow people were farming in the valleys where they lived, and some men and women were working hard in broad daylight to make the longbow people flourish. Patriarch Jiang Yun and a few other old immortals were sitting under an ancient pine tree at the top of a mountain, smiling and pointing out the scenery of the world. Everything in the East Sea province was normal, but Princess Zhonglu was nowhere to be seen. Wu Qi's pupils constricted to the size of needle tips as he quickly scanned the surroundings with his divine will. Before long, he discovered a dense clump of dark mist that covered 10,000 miles in circumference above Yuanzhou City in the province ruled by Yi clan. Dark clouds rolled, and chilly winds kept blowing out of them. Nearly half of the province's territory was blanketed by Xianbing, and the area of over 1 billion miles in circumference was a world of ice and snow. Countless people had died of cold and starvation. From time to time, wisps of gold element energy would soar into the sky from the dark cloud, accompanied by a muffled, thunderous zither tune. Wu Qi recognized the gold element energy and the zither tune. They were the attacks unleashed by Princess Zhang Li's Silver Lotus and Immortal Zither. On that dark cloud, 100 miles tall god sat cross-legged in a puff of dark mist. Two ferocious black flood dragons hovered around him, breathing large streams of cold mist into the dark cloud down below from time to time. The god's hands were locked into a strange incantation gesture, turning the natural energy in the surroundings into a dreadful cold air and sealing off all directions. His body was covered with a thick layer of ice. Obviously, he was the culprit who caused the world of ice and snow. Wu Qi sent his divine will into the dark cloud, but the cold air made his divine will feel very uncomfortable, and he could not see what was hiding in the dark cloud. The fact that the dark cloud could isolate Wu Qi's divine will showed that it was the main reason why he could not contact Princess Zhonglu. Snorting coldly, Wu Qi transformed into a bolt of lightning and darted towards the dark cloud. At the same time, he spread his divine will out like a huge net, trying to find out why the god had invaded the territory of Diyu, but no army of Diyu had gone to fight against him. With a glance, Wu Qi immediately found a small group of heavily armored elite soldiers stationed at the edge of the province, about 1,000 miles away. Occasionally, some patrolling soldiers from nearby provinces would approach the border of this province, but the soldiers stationed at the border would immediately drive them away. The official tokens in their hands seemed to have great authority, as none of the patrolling soldiers from other provinces dared to disobey their orders. As for the messengers sent out by the local officials of this province, Wu Qi had also found their whereabouts. In some remote valleys he found a large number of chopped corpses, all wearing the robes of low-grade officials of Diyu or armors. Obviously, they were messengers sent out to inform the higher-grade officials of the changes in this place. However, the soldiers stationed at the border had intercepted and killed them. That was why the god could set up a formation to trap Princess Zhonglu and her companions without any scruples. "Bastard!" cursed Wu Qi in a low voice. Obviously, someone in Diyu had colluded with the god and was helping him cover up the news. Quickly spreading his divine sense toward the god, Wu Qi's divine sense swept across the land like a comb. All of a sudden, Wu Qi found a splendid field headquarters on the top of a mountain about 100,000 miles away from the god. King Zhangqiu and Liu Bang were sitting under a huge flagpole, drinking and chatting with each other. A few expert chefs were removing various precious ingredients from the bodies of some struggling and roaring demon immortals, cooking delicious dishes for King Zhangqiu and Liu Bang on the spot. A few demon immortals who had reverted to their original forms were left on the hillside, roaring hoarsely as they twisted and struggled on the ground. But how could they move when their cultivation bases were destroyed and most of their organs were taken away and cooked? "It's you again, King Zhangqiu." Wu Qi gritted his teeth in anger. His divine sense turned into a thin needle and plunged into the tent behind King Zhangqiu, only to find that Lord Longyang was sitting behind the table in the tent, handling all kinds of official documents for King Zhangqiu. Wu Qi was taken aback for a moment, and then a surge of anger rushed straight to his head. He did not care about the relationship between Lord Longyang and King Zhangqiu, but as Wu Qi's ally, Lord Longyang had made an agreement to help each other. Yet, when King Zhangqiu plotted against Wu Qi and Princess Zhanglu, Lord Longyang seemed to be calm and did not show any reaction. This made Wu Qi feel betrayed. Grinning coldly, Wu Qi stomped his feet on the ground, causing a huge underground energy vein to twitch. Abruptly, his body tore through the void and appeared over the god's head hundreds of millions of miles away. With a clear cry, beams of green light shot out from 12 of his vital meridians, and 12 transparent Kunwu swords flew out soundlessly, each as light as a goose feather. All the Pangu's sacred energy in his body was injected into the swords, which immediately made them extremely heavy. With a wave of his hand, Wu Qi poured a great amount of earth element energy from the void into the swords. The 12 swords formed a small sword formation, emitting the unique aura of a towering mountain as they slashed down at the god. Using the 12 swords to form a small fiend-slaying sword formation, using earth element energy as the core driving force, and using the will of earth restraining water to attack the god who was obviously born of the law of water, there was no doubt that Wu Qi's understanding of the fiend-slaying sword formation had reached a certain level. As the Kunwu swords fell, the god looked up in horror at the green sword beam coming down from above and cried out in a hoarse voice, Is this Kunwu sword?" Clearly in a panic, the god raised both hands to block the sword beam. A miserable howl rang out as the incomparably sharp and heavy Kunwu sword cut off the god's arms from the shoulders like a sharp knife cutting through tofu. The momentum of the swords did not dissipate, and they went straight into the god's body. The 12 Kunwu swords pierced through his waist and abdomen, smashed his internal organs like a hot knife through butter, and came out from the bottom of his abdomen. The earth element energy invaded the god's body, suppressed the rich water energy in him, destroyed his body, and even began to shake the core of his divine body, the law of heaven and earth that was his origin. Countless cracks of various sizes appeared on the god's body, from which billowing black water gushed out of them with loud rumbling noises. For a moment, it was as if dozens of rivers were gushing out of his body at the same time. It was a very strange scene. Every drop of black water was the god's divine power. Even though his body was now 100 miles tall and his true form was 10,000 miles long, he could not withstand such a consumption. The god let out a terrified curse, then hurriedly transformed into a black wave and rushed up into the sky. But as the 12 Kunwu swords spun slightly, hundreds of small yellow mountains immediately appeared in the sky. These mountains were all condensed of earth element energy and driven by the fiend-slaying sword formation, which gave them endless magical effects. Each of them emanated a strong suction force, constantly drawing large amounts of black water from the god's body and rapidly consuming his divine power and life force. At last, the god could not hold back the horror in his heart. He roared, opened his mouth, and spat out a pitch-black trident, thrusting it at Wu Qi. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.